Hey, tonight, you're not in your bed. You're in a place where the air is still heavy with the scent of dust and time. Something ancient is here with you. You think of ancient Egypt and see pyramids of gold, divine pharaohs, and a civilization that touched eternity. But what if the real story isn't about their lives, but their deaths? Your fingertips brush across cool, carved stone, its edges worn smooth by time yet sharp with memory. It feels like history itself is breathing beneath your touch. By the end of this journey, you'll understand that the real curse of the pharaohs wasn't magic from a forgotten god, but something far more human and far more terrifying. What time is it? Where you are? I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. And if you enjoy these quiet dives into the past, maybe hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights. Let your body sink into the mattress. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, low hum. You're not just a listener tonight. You're an explorer. And you've just found a door that has been sealed for 3000 years. You don't wake up to an alarm clock. You wake up to the sun. Not gently, not through a soft curtain, but with a sharp white blade of light that cuts across the single room you call home. It streams through a small, high opening in the wall, an unglazed square that serves as your only window to the world. And it reminds you, as it does every morning, that the day has already begun without your permission. Your house isn't made of wood, or stone, not really. It's built from mud bricks baked hard under the same sun that now floods your room. The walls are thick, but uneven, cool to the touch in the early morning, but you know they will become a slow baking oven by midday. The floor beneath your bare feet isn't wood or tile. It's packed earth worn smooth by generations of footsteps, cool and slightly damp. You're not alone, of course. Privacy is a concept that hasn't been invented yet. In the small space around you, your entire family sleeps. Your father's soft snores, your mother's gentle breathing, the rustle of your siblings turning on their own reed mats. You are a family woven together by proximity, by necessity. You can smell the morning. It's a complex perfume. The sharp, earthy scent of the family goat who sleeps just outside drifts through the doorway. It mixes with the faint, lingering smell of smoke from last night's cooking fire and the damp, living scent of the Nile carried on the early breeze. Through the thin walls you can hear your neighbors starting their day. A muffled argument, a crying baby, the clatter of a clay pot. You sit up on your bed, which is really just a mat of woven reeds laid on the floor. A thin linen sheet is your only cover. There is no other furniture. No table, no chairs, just a few low wooden stools in the corner, and the large clay jars that hold your family's water and grain. This is your world, simple, small, and shared. And as the sun climbs higher, you know it's time to leave this small shelter and face the day. The morning air is already warm, and your stomach, a hollow drum, reminds you it's time to eat. There is no table to set, no menu to consider. In your world, a meal is not about choice. It is about sustenance. It is about having enough fuel to face the sun. Your mother hands you a thick, flat loaf of bread, still warm from the clay oven outside. It's the center of every meal, the constant in a life of variables. It's made from barley, or if the harvest was generous, emmer wheat. The texture is coarse, dense, and requires strong teeth. You break off a piece, its edge rough against your fingers. To soften it, to make it yield, you dip it into your cup of beer. Yes, beer. It's the water of your people. From the youngest child to the oldest elder, everyone drinks it, but this isn't the clear golden liquid of modern times. This is henket, a thick, cloudy brew that tastes of sour grain and earth. It's more like a thin, fermented porridge than a drink, but it's packed with the calories you'll need for the day's labor. And more importantly, the water used to create it has been boiled, purified by fire. It is safe. It will not make you sick like the glittering, beautiful, but treacherous waters of the Nile. You chew slowly, deliberately. With every bite, you feel a familiar, faint grit between your teeth. It's sand. Tiny, almost invisible particles from the massive limestone slabs used to grind the grain have become a permanent seasoning in every loaf. You don't notice it anymore. Not really. It is simply the taste of bread, the taste of home. Today, you are lucky. Alongside the bread, there is a small bowl of cooked lentils and a few raw onions, their sharp, pungent flavor a welcome shock to the palate. On most days, it is just the bread and the beer. Meat is a dream, a word spoken of during festivals when a bull is sacrificed at the temple, its flesh a rare gift shared among the fortunate. This meal is not meant to be savored. It's not meant for conversation. You eat in quiet gratitude, knowing that having food today is not a guarantee for tomorrow. The feeling of hunger is a quiet, constant companion, a shadow that walks beside you. But for now, with this simple meal, the shadow has been pushed away. For now, this is enough. The sun is climbing higher, and the fields are waiting. Your world is alive with gods. They are not distant figures in a far-off heaven. They are woven into the very fabric of your existence. They are in the heat of the sun, the mud of the river, the breath of the wind. You wake and thank Ra for piloting his fiery boat across the sky, for without his daily journey, the world would plunge into eternal darkness. You fetch water and whisper a prayer to Hapi, the spirit of the Nile, for you know that his annual flood is the difference between a full belly and a season of starvation. In your small home, a clay figurine of Bastet, the cat goddess, sits in a niche in the wall, her silent gaze, a promise of protection against the spirits that lurk in the night. Your life and the life of all Egypt is governed by a single sacred principle, Ma'at. It is not a deity you can pray to, but a divine force, the force of truth, order, justice, and cosmic balance. Every action you take, from planting a seed in a straight line to speaking a true word to your neighbor, is done to uphold Ma'at. When the harvest is bountiful and the people are healthy, Ma'at is strong. But when sickness, famine, or war comes, you know it is a sign that this delicate balance has been disturbed, that chaos is trying to unmake the world. And this belief shapes your view of everything, especially death. To you, death is not an end. It is a transition, a dangerous but necessary journey. You believe your soul is made of many parts, your Ka, the vital life force, and your Ba, your unique personality, often depicted as a bird with a human head. After you die, your Ba must be able to return to your body each night to rest. If your body is destroyed, your soul has no home. It will be lost forever. This is why the tomb is so important. It is not a grave. It is an eternal home, a perfect replica of the life you hope to lead in the field of reeds, the green and pleasant paradise where your spirit will live on. To make that journey, your body must be preserved through the sacred art of mummification. Your tomb must be filled with food, furniture, tools, and magical texts to help you navigate the treacherous underworld. And most importantly, it must remain sealed. To break into a tomb, to desecrate the body, to steal the offerings, this is not just a crime against a person. It is an act of cosmic vandalism. It is the murder of a soul for all eternity. The sun god Ra begins his nightly journey into the underworld, and the western sky bleeds into hues of orange and deep purple. You return to your home, your body aching from a long day of labor in the fields. The air cools slightly. The sounds of the village soften. The rhythm of your life feels constant, predictable, eternal, just as the gods intended. But tonight, the air is different. It carries something new. A rumor, a whisper that started with the men who work in the deep, silent valley across the river. You hear it at the well as the women draw water for the evening meal. You hear it at the market, a hushed conversation over a basket of dates. They say a tomb has been found, not a grand tomb of a powerful pharaoh plundered centuries ago, but a small one, an insignificant one hidden beneath the rubble of a greater king's house. It belongs to a boy, they say, a pharaoh whose name has been all but forgotten. And then you see them, the foreigners. They have been here for years, digging in the heat, their pale skin always covered from the sun. But now there is a new energy about them, a hurried excitement. They work with strange metal tools and speak in a language that sounds like rushing water. They do not move with the reverence you were taught. They do not seem to fear the gods of the valley, the ancient guardians of the dead. Their curiosity feels dangerous, like a child playing with fire. The elders in your village watch from a distance, their faces etched with the lines of worry. They shake their heads and mutter warnings under their breath. The sleep of kings is not meant to be disturbed. The eternal silence is sacred. Some things, one of them says, his voice a dry rustle like old papyrus, are meant to be left in darkness. You look towards the valley as dusk falls, and you feel a shift in the air, a subtle tremor in the perfect order of Ma'at. A door that has been closed for more than 3,000 years is about to be opened. And you can't help but wonder, with a small, cold knot of fear in your stomach, what will come out when it does. You are a tomb worker, not by choice, but by trade. Your name is one that history will never record, but your hands are the ones that built eternity. Your father was a stonecutter for the Pharaohs, and his father before him. This is your inheritance, the dust, the silence, and the secrets buried deep within the earth. You live in the village of Deir el Medina, a small, tightly knit community of artisans nestled in a dusty bowl of the Theban hills. This village is a world unto itself, set apart from the grand temples and bustling cities along the Nile. It was built for a single sacred purpose, to construct and decorate the eternal homes of the god-kings in the valley just over the ridge. Your life here is one of contradictions. You are a simple craftsman, yet you work with gold and lapis lazuli. You live in a humble mud brick house, yet you spend your days painting the walls of palaces meant for the afterlife. Every morning, long before the first rays of Ra's sunboat touch the cliffs, you wake. The air is still and cool. You gather your tools, your bronze chisel, your wooden mallet, your water skin, and join the silent procession of men walking out of the village. The path you take is not a road for merchants or soldiers. It is a hidden trail, a path of ghosts, known only to your brotherhood of craftsmen. You do not speak of your work, not even to your wife. She knows you labor for the Pharaoh, but she does not ask where. It is a question that does not exist in your home, a silence born of reverence and fear. The secrets of the valley must be kept. You arrive at the entrance to the tomb, a dark, unassuming gash in the face of a limestone cliff. You descend into the earth down a steep, narrow corridor, cut deep into the bedrock. The world of light and heat vanishes behind you. Down here, the air changes. It becomes cool, still, and heavy with the smell of stone dust and the faint, sweet scent of cedar wood from the coffins yet to come. The only light is the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps, their flames dancing in the breathless air, casting long, monstrous shadows of you and your fellow workers against the unfinished walls. This is your office, a sacred, silent workshop, a womb within the mountain. The dust is a constant companion. It is fine and white, the powdered bones of the mountain itself. It settles on your skin, in your hair, and coats your throat. The only sound is the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of your chisel against stone, a sound so constant it becomes a kind of prayer, a heartbeat for the tomb. You are not a simple laborer. You are an artist. You have spent your life learning this craft. Your hands, though calloused and rough, move with a precision that belies their appearance. You spend your days carving the intricate hieroglyphs that tell the story of the Pharaoh's life and his journey to the gods. You trace the eye of Horus, and for a moment you feel it watching you back. You carve the wings of Isis, and you feel a protective presence in the stillness. Later, you will paint these walls. You will grind malachite for green ochre, for red, and soot for black. With a brush made of reeds, your hands steady and practiced, you will bring the gods to life. You will paint the Pharaoh standing before Osiris, his heart pure. You will paint the sunboat sailing across the sky of the underworld. These are not just images. They are magic. They are reality. You work with a mixture of immense pride and a deep, quiet fear. You know you are not building a grave. You are building a machine for resurrection, a vessel for eternity. Every line you carve, every color you mix, must be perfect. An error is not just a mistake. It is a disruption of Ma'at, a flaw in the fabric of the cosmos that could jeopardize the Pharaoh's journey. And so, you work with a focus that borders on meditation, whispering quiet prayers to the gods to guide your hands and protect you from their wrath. Finally, after years of labor, the day of silence comes. The royal mummy is brought in a grand, somber procession. The priests perform their final sacred rituals. The air is thick with incense and chants. Then your work begins one last time. You and your brothers move the massive granite lid of the sarcophagus into place. You help set the great stone blocks that seal the burial chamber, then the antechamber, then the final corridor. The sound of stone grating against stone is a deep groan, a sound like the world closing a door forever. You plaster over the entrance, and with a final, artful touch, you and the others scatter limestone chips over the plaster, making it blend perfectly with the surrounding hillside. The entrance is gone. The tomb has vanished. Your work is done. You have hidden a god. And now you must walk away and forget the path that led you here, carrying the secret in silence to your own grave. The dust of the artisans has settled. The sound of chisels has faded into the memory of the mountain. Now a holier silence descends, and a different kind of work begins. It is a work not of muscle and stone, but of magic and whispers. You are no longer a craftsman. You are a lector. Priest, your head shaven clean, your body purified with Nile water, your form draped in the purest white linen. Your tools are not mallets and chisels, but scrolls of papyrus jars, of sacred oils, and the weight of ancient words. Your purpose is not to construct, but to consecrate, to awaken the senses of the dead king, and to weave a net of divine protection so strong that not even time itself can break it. You walk down the steep, painted corridor, your soft leather sandals making no sound on the stone floor. You pass the vibrant paintings the artists have just completed. The gods on the walls seem to watch you, their painted eyes gleaming in the flickering torchlight. You see the pharaoh, larger than life, making offerings to Osiris, the lord of the underworld. You see the sunboat making its perilous journey through the darkness. These are not just decorations. They are a map, a guide for the soul you are about to send on its way. The air in the burial chamber is thick, not with dust, but with the heavy, sweet scent of myrrh and frankincense. Incense smolders in golden bowls, its smoke curling towards the ceiling, carrying your prayers to the heavens. You are not just in a room deep beneath the earth. You are in an antechamber to the afterlife. Before you stands the upright, golden sarcophagus, a perfect, serene effigy of the king. His painted eyes are closed. His golden hands are crossed over his chest. His senses are dormant, locked in the stillness of death. Your task is to awaken them. The assistants bring forward the sacred tools, each wrapped carefully in its own linen cloth. You unveil them one by one. There is the Pesesh Kef, a strange fish-tailed blade used for the ceremonial touching of the mouth. There is the ceremonial adze, its blade carved from meteoric iron, a metal from the heavens, a gift from the gods. There is a wand shaped like a serpent, and a small vessel carved in the shape of a calf's leg. Each tool has a purpose. Each has a power. The chanting begins a low, resonant hum from the other priests that seems to make the very air vibrate. It is a rhythm older than the pyramids, a sound that bridges the world of the living and the world of the dead. You lift the adze. You approach the golden face. With a steady hand, a hand trained for this ritual, since you were a boy, you gently touch the lips of the pharaoh's effigy. You whisper the ancient words, your voice low and clear. I open your mouth for you. You touch his eyes. I open your eyes for you, his ears, his nose, that you may speak and see and hear and breathe in the great land of the dead. You are not just touching cold metal. You are unlocking a soul. You are giving him back his voice to speak the magical passwords before the guardians of the underworld. You are giving him back his sight to behold the beauty of the field of reeds. You are giving him back his legs to walk the path to eternity. With his senses awakened, you must now arm his soul for the journey. On a clean linen cloth beside you lies a collection of amulets, each glowing with its own protective magic. There is the Ankh, the key of life, the Jed pillar, the symbol of Osiris's spine promising stability and resurrection, and most importantly, the heart scarab, a beautiful beetle carved from deep blue lapis lazuli. You and your assistants part the linen wrappings of the mummy with practiced care. Over the king's heart, you place the scarab, its flat underside, inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead. It is a plea, a command to his own heart, begging it not to betray him during the final judgment, not to speak against him when it is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. You place the other amulets in their proper positions, your fingers moving with the certainty of faith, re-wrapping the linen as you go. The final protection is not an object, but a A warning. You turn to the walls near the entrance where a scribe priest is painting the final hieroglyphs in black ink. You recite the words for him to write, "As for any man who shall enter this tomb in his impurity, I shall seize him by the neck like a goose. His terror shall be upon him, and the gods will reckon with him for it." This is not a curse of sudden death. It is not a trap of dark magic that leaps from the walls. It is a divine and legal notice, a warning that judgment follows desecration, not in this life, but in the next. It is a plea for peace backed by the threat of eternal damnation. The rituals are complete. The magic is set. The warnings are written. You take one last look at the golden face, serene and eternal in the flickering light. Then you turn and walk away, never looking back. You hear the deep, grinding groan of the massive stone block being lowered into place, a sound of finality that echoes down the corridor. The plasterers move in sealing the cracks, covering the door, erasing it from the world of the living. You have done your duty. You have locked a soul into its eternal home, protected by walls of stone and whispers of magic. You pray for the king's sake and for your own, that it will be enough. The incense from the priest's rituals has barely faded into the dry desert air. The final stone is in place. The sacred spells have been whispered, and the Pharaoh has begun his journey into eternity, safe and undisturbed. Or so the priests believe. But on the other side of the Nile, in the cramped, dusty villages where life is cheap and bread is scarce, another kind of whisper begins. The priests speak of eternal life, but your children speak of hunger. Their bellies are tight and empty. The harvest was poor, the taxes were high, and the gods, it seems, were not listening to your prayers. You are not a priest, you are not a noble. You are a stonemason, and you spent 2 years of your life carving the very walls that now protect a mountain of gold. You know the tomb. You know its passages, its weak points, the way the stone sounds when struck just right. You know the stories of the magical wards, the protective demons, the divine wrath that awaits any who desecrate a king's final rest. And you are terrified. But you are more terrified of watching your family starve. So, in the dead of night, you meet with the others. This is not a lone act of madness. It is an organized operation, a desperate conspiracy, born from shared suffering. There is a guard who can be bribed with the promise of a single golden ring. There is a former worker who remembers where a false wall was constructed. There is you with the knowledge of stone and the heavy heart of a man about to commit the ultimate sacrilege. You wait for moonless night, when the darkness over the Valley of the Kings is absolute, a thick velvet cloak that swallows all light and sound. You move like ghosts through the necropolis, your bare feet making no noise on the sand. The air is cold and the silence is immense. Every gust of wind sounds like the sigh of a restless spirit. Every shadow cast by the jagged cliffs looks like a waiting guardian. Your own heartbeat is a loud, frantic drum in your ears. You reach the hidden entrance. The plaster is still fresh. The sacred seals of the necropolis, the jackal of Anubis, stare out at you from the clay, a silent warning. For a moment, you hesitate. Every story you have ever been told, every prayer you have ever uttered, screams at you to turn back. This is not just a door. It is a boundary between worlds. To break it is to invite chaos into your soul. But then you think of the empty grain jars at home. You think of your child's hollow eyes. You take your bronze chisel and your wooden mallet. You whisper a desperate apology to Osiris, to Anubis, to the spirit of the king himself. And then you strike. The sound of the seal cracking is shockingly loud in the stillness. It feels like you have broken a bone of the earth itself. Dust, ancient and sacred, falls away. Behind it is the stone block. Working together silently, you and your companions use wooden levers to pry it loose. The groan of stone against stone is a sound of agony. Then you are in. The air rushes out to meet you, thick and cloying with the scent of perfumes, oils, and something else, the scent of eternity. Your torch casts frantic dancing shadows on the walls. Gold glimmers everywhere, golden chariots' chests inlaid with ivory statues, with lapis lazuli eyes. It is a treasure meant to fund an entire afterlife. You do not linger, you do not admire, you move with a thief's purpose. You break open chests, stuffing small precious objects into linen sacks, jewelry, golden amulets, small statues, alabaster jars, filled with precious ointments. You ignore the larger furniture, the food offerings, the grand sarcophagus in the burial chamber. You take only what you can carry, only what can be melted down and sold without a trace. The work is fast, brutal, and filled with a cold dread. Every shadow seems to move. Every flicker of the torch seems to form a face in the darkness. You feel the weight of the dead king's eyes on you, a silent, heavy judgment. Within an hour, you are gone, scrambling back up the corridor and into the desert night. You seal the entrance as best you can, scattering sand and rock to hide your tracks. You do not look back. The gold will feed your family for a year. You have traded a king's eternity for your child's survival. But as you run the sacred dust, still clinging to your skin, you know that you will carry the weight of that broken seal for the rest of your life. The first curse was never supernatural. It was born from the oldest human pains, hunger and desperation. And the Pharaoh's eternal rest was disturbed not by vengeful spirits, but by the hungry ghosts of his own kingdom. You are not the desperate thief in the night. You are not the hurried priest performing a final rite. You are someone else from a different time, a different world. You are an explorer, and after years of searching, after seasons of dust and disappointment, you have found it, a sealed tomb, untouched, unbroken. You push aside the final stone that blocks the entrance. It moves with a deep, grating sound that seems to tear the fabric of silence. A rush of air meets you, not cold, not foul, but ancient. It's an air that has not been breathed by a living soul for more than 3,000 years. It carries the scent of time itself, the faint, sweet aroma of dried flowers, the sharp, clean smell of cedarwood oil, the dusty perfume of linen and resin. It doesn't smell of decay. It smells of preservation. You hold your torch high and step across the threshold. For a moment, you are blind. The darkness inside is absolute, a physical presence that seems to swallow the light. But then, as your eyes adjust, the world within reveals itself. At first, it is just chaos, a mountain of gold, a jumble of shapes and shadows that your mind struggles to comprehend. Gilded couches carved in the shape of monstrous beasts, their eyes inlaid with ivory, seem to roar silently at your intrusion. Alabaster vases so thin they are almost translucent, are piled in corners. Dismantled chariots, their golden wheels and frames gleaming, are stacked against a wall, waiting for a king who will never ride again. Blackened shrines, their doors still sealed with the original rope, and clay stamps hold secrets you cannot yet fathom. You take another step, and the silence envelops you. It is a silence unlike any you have ever known. It is not empty. It is heavy, a physical weight that presses against your eardrums. You can hear your own heart beating a loud, intrusive rhythm in this timeless space. You realize you are holding your breath, afraid that even the sound of your own life is a form of desecration. The only other sound is the soft crunch of dust under your feet, the dust of 3,000 forgotten years. The air is cool and impossibly dry. You feel a strange sense of being an intruder, a trespasser in a sacred dream. Every step you take feels like it is breaking a spell. You are the first living thing to breathe this air, to cast a shadow on these walls in millennia. And then you see them, the silent guardians. They are not ghosts. They are not spirits. They are statues, but they feel more alive than anything else in the chamber. To your right, standing sentinel on either side of a sealed doorway, are two life-sized figures of the king, carved from wood, painted black as the fertile Nile mud, and adorned with golden kilts and sandals. They are his Ka, his life force left here to protect his final resting place. Their painted eyes, though lifeless, seem to hold a deep, unwavering gaze. They are not threatening. They are patient. They have been waiting. Deeper within you, see the form of Anubis, the jackal god, perched atop a golden shrine, his sleek black body a silent promise of his role as the guardian of the dead. He is not just a statue. He is a divine presence, a protector of the sacred threshold you are about to cross. These figures do not move. They do not speak. But you feel their presence as surely as you feel the cool air on your skin. They are the true guardians of this tomb, silent witnesses to a promise made between a king and his gods. You are not alone in here. You have stepped into a room full of ancient watchers. You are not a robber. You are a witness, and the weight of what you are witnessing is immense. Before you lies not just treasure, but time itself, sealed and waiting. And you are the one who has just broken the seal. The figures of the gods are no longer menacing. They are protective. The hieroglyphs are not threats. They are pleas. The tomb doesn't speak, but it watches. The silence of the tomb remains, but the world outside does not. For more than 1,000 years after the last ancient thief fled into the night, the Valley of the Kings sleeps its secrets guarded by sand and sun. Empires rise and fall far away. Rome, Byzantium, the caliphates, their histories are written in languages the pharaohs would not have understood. The tombs wait patient and forgotten by all but the local tribes who know to respect the land of the dead. Then, in the year 1798, the world changes forever. A new sound arrives in Egypt, not the soft padding of sandals, but the heavy, rhythmic thud of military boots. Napoleon Bonaparte has arrived, but he does not come alone. With his army of soldiers, he brings a different kind of force, an army of 167 savants. You are one of them. You are not a soldier of conquest. You are a soldier of knowledge, a geographer, a botanist, an artist, an engineer. You have traded your dusty library in Paris for the blazing, relentless sun of the Nile. Your mission is not to conquer a nation, but to document a civilization. And you are utterly overwhelmed. The drawings you saw, back home, the stories you read in old Greek texts, they were lies, pale, thin imitations of this impossible reality. You stand before the great pyramids of Giza, and you feel a sense of scale so profound it silences the part of your mind that tries to measure and explain. You ride on horseback to Karnak, and you get lost in a forest of stone columns, each one so vast it seems to hold up the sky itself. And everywhere you look, there are the hieroglyphs. Thousands of them, millions of them carved into every surface. Birds, snakes, eyes, seated gods. A language that no one on earth can read. A story that has been silent for 2,000 years. Your work is meticulous and urgent. You measure the height of the pyramids. You sketch the layout of the temples. You draw every single hieroglyph. You can find your hand cramping as you try to capture the perfect curve of a falcon's head or the serene smile of a forgotten queen. You collect plants, rocks, insects. You are creating a complete record of a lost world. This work, this grand obsessive cataloging, will one day become the Description de l'Egypte, a monumental collection of books that will ignite Europe's imagination and give birth to the modern science of Egyptology. But your greatest discovery comes by accident. In 1799, a French soldier reinforcing a fort near the town of Rashid, or Rosetta, as the French call it, finds a dark slab of basalt built into an old wall. It is covered in text, not one text but three. The top is written in the mysterious hieroglyphs, the middle in a different cursive Egyptian script called Demotic, and the bottom is written in a language you know, ancient Greek. You realize immediately what this is. It is not just a stone. It is a key, a dictionary frozen in time. The same text written in 3 languages, one of which the world can still read. The stone is a promise that the silent history of Egypt can be unlocked. You and your fellow scholars treat it like a sacred relic. But even as you work, a new kind of violation is taking place. The artifacts begin their long journey north. Obelisks, statues, and papyri are packed into crates destined for the museums of London and Paris. The tombs once violated by ancient thieves for gold are now being emptied by European scholars for knowledge. And you wonder, in the quiet of the desert night, if the ancient gods see any difference at all. The door to Egypt's past has been thrown open, but you cannot be sure if you are a guest or just another more sophisticated kind of thief. The key, the great Rosetta Stone, had unlocked the door to Egypt's silent history. But what rushed through that door wasn't just knowledge, it was greed. The 19th century arrived, and with it, a new kind of fever swept across Europe. A fever for all things Egyptian, Egyptomania. And it was a fever that burned hot and reckless. You are no longer a careful scholar. You are a man of means of leisure from the misty green shores of England. You have read the adventure stories, seen the sketches of grand temples, and heard the whispers of gold. Egypt to you is not a civilization to be studied. It is a treasure chest left open by time, and you have come with a crowbar and a sense of entitlement. You arrive on the banks of the Nile and hire a crew of local villagers. You don't use brushes and delicate tools. You use shovels. Sometimes if a passage is blocked, you use dynamite. The sound of explosions echoes through the sacred valleys of brutal, modern thunder that the ancient gods never anticipated. You are not searching for context. You are searching for objects. A beautiful statue for your garden back in Kent. A painted coffin to serve as a conversation piece in your study. A handful of amulets to impress your friends at the club. You break into minor tombs, your workers clearing away sand and stone with a frantic energy. If a sarcophagus is too heavy, you break it open right there in the dust. You tear through linen wrappings that have been untouched for millennia, searching for the jewelry hidden within. The human remains, the body that was once a person, a father, a mother, are tossed aside an inconvenience in your quest for treasure. Anything not deemed valuable pottery, simple tools, broken fragments is left to crumble in the sun. You are not an archaeologist. You are a collector, and the line between collecting and looting has become very, very thin. This lack of reverence reaches its peak not in Egypt, but back in the drawing rooms of London. You host an evening gathering. The air is thick with perfume and anticipation. The centerpiece is not a floral arrangement, but a sarcophagus brought all the way from the desert. This is a mummy unwrapping, the height of fashionable morbid entertainment. As the ancient linen, brittle with age, is torn away, you and your guests lean in closer. You see the amulets, the beads, the shriveled form beneath. You smile, you make polite conversation, but deep down in a quiet modern part of your soul, something feels wrong. This feels like a desecration, a quiet violation, and amidst this casual sacrilege, the stories begin. Not in headlines yet, but in quiet, nervous whispers over tea. You hear of a man who bought a cursed amulet and whose shipping business failed spectacularly a month later. You hear of a woman who attended an unwrapping and developed a strange lingering cough that no doctor could cure. You hear that the ship carrying a certain sarcophagus back to England encountered a terrible, unnatural storm, losing 3 sailors overboard. These are just stories, of course, coincidences, the kind of tales that superstitious people tell. There is no proof, no pattern, but the seeds are being planted. The world is learning to associate the treasures of Egypt with a price, a quiet, creeping sense of retribution. This is not yet the curse of the Pharaohs. It is the soil being tilled, made fertile with fear and fascination. The world is now primed to believe. It is waiting for a king, a tomb, and a tragedy to tie it all together. It is waiting for Tutankhamun. The 19th century's chaotic gold rush for antiquities slowly gives way to a more methodical, more scientific approach. But the romance, the obsession, never truly fades. As the 20th century dawns, one man stands in the Valley of the Kings, convinced that it still holds one last magnificent secret. His name is Howard Carter. You are this man. You are not a wealthy gentleman playing at archaeology. You are a professional, a meticulous draftsman, a stubborn excavator, a man who has spent his entire adult life under the Egyptian sun, learning the language of the sand and stone. You are not searching for just any tomb. You are hunting for one king in particular. A pharaoh from the 18th dynasty, a boy who reigned briefly and was largely erased from history. A king named Tutankhamun. The world believes the valley is empty. For decades, other more famous archaeologists have declared it so. They say it has been picked clean by generations of thieves and explorers. But you do not believe them. You have found clues that others missed: a faience, cup, a piece of gold foil, a few clay seals bearing the young king's name, all scattered in the debris. They are whispers, fragments of a story no one else is listening to. To you, they are a map. But a map is useless without funding. Your search is made possible by your patron, George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He is your opposite in almost every way. A wealthy English aristocrat, a gambler, a lover of race cars and high society. He came to Egypt for the warm, dry air to heal lungs damaged in a car accident, and he took up archaeology as a hobby to pass the time. But he too has been bitten by the obsession. He believes in you. For now. The years drag on. Each season, from autumn to spring, you and your team of Egyptian workers toil under the relentless sun. The work is not glamorous. It is brutal, monotonous labor. You are not just digging in sand. You are moving thousands of tons of rock and rubble, the discarded waste from other earlier excavations that now covers the valley floor. Your workers fill baskets with debris, carry them on their shoulders up the steep inclines, and dump them again and again, day after day. The first season begins with high hopes. You find nothing. The second season, you find the foundations of ancient workers' huts, but no tomb. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Still nothing. The whispers in Cairo grow louder. They call it Carter's folly. Other archaeologists mock your persistence. Lord Carnarvon's letters from England become more strained. The cost is immense. The results are non-existent. You feel the pressure mounting. You walk the valley at dusk, after the workers have gone home, tracing the lines of the cliffs with your eyes. The silence is heavy. The ghosts of pharaohs and thieves alike seem to watch you from the shadows. Doubt creeps in a cold serpent in the desert heat. What if they are right? What if there is nothing left to find? But then morning comes, and with the sunrise, your obsession is reborn. You feel it in your bones. He is here somewhere. You just haven't looked in the right place. After 5 fruitless seasons, Lord Carnarvon has had enough. He summons you back to his home in England, the grand Highclere Castle. The conversation is tense. He tells you the hunt is over. The expense is too great. The valley has given up all its secrets. But you are not ready to surrender. You make one last desperate plea. You point to a small triangular patch of land on your map, directly beneath the entrance to the tomb of Ramesses VI. It's a section. No one has properly cleared a spot littered with the foundations of the very workers' huts you had uncovered years before. You argue that no ancient architect would have built huts on top of a royal tomb unless that tomb was already hidden, already forgotten. It is your last hope, your final theory. You tell Carnarvon that if he will fund just one more season, you will personally bear the cost if nothing is found. He looks at you with the fire in your eyes that is not dimmed after all these years of disappointment. He sees not a reckless gambler, but a man possessed by a single, unwavering conviction. He sighs a sound of resignation and reluctant admiration. "One more season, Carter," he says, "and then we are done." You return to Egypt not with triumph, but with a final chance. The clock is ticking. The sand is running out. And the boy king is waiting. The air in the Valley of the Kings feels different this season. It is not filled with the usual buzz of hope that marks the beginning of a dig. It is heavy with finality. This is your last chance. One more season, Lord Carnarvon had said, and then it is over. You, Howard Carter, have brought a spark of life into this land of the dead. A tiny golden canary. The work begins on November 1st, 1922, in the small triangular patch of land you had pleaded to excavate. Your focus is on clearing the rubble down to the bedrock at the base of the tomb of Ramesses VI. The labor is slow, hot, and monotonous. You watch your team of workers, their movements practiced almost mechanical, their baskets filling with ancient debris. Another basket of rubble, another day closer to the end, another day closer to failure. The first few days yield nothing but dust and disappointment. The familiar ache of doubt begins to settle in your bones. Then, on the morning of November 4th, everything changes. The work is proceeding as usual. You are overseeing the clearing of the remains of ancient workers' huts. Your young water boy, a local named Hussein Abdel Rasul, is carrying water jars across the site. His sandal catches on something just beneath the surface of the sand. It's not the soft give of earth or the shifting of loose gravel. It is a hard, flat surface, a clink of stone against stone. He calls out. You approach your heart, not yet leaping, but pausing, listening. You kneel down and brush away the sand with your own hands. Your fingers trace a sharp, clean edge. This is not a natural rock. This has been cut. This has been placed. It's a step. A single, man-made step, leading down into the bedrock. A dead silence falls over your small crew. The rhythmic scrape of shovels stops. Every eye is on you. A part of you wants to shout, to celebrate. But years of discipline take over. You calmly give the order to clear the area. Your voice is steady, but inside, a storm is breaking. The work is slow now, careful, almost reverent. The first step is cleared, then beneath it, a second appears, and a third. The staircase descends into the earth, a promise whispered in limestone. 12 steps are uncovered, then 14, then 16. The stairway ends before a doorway completely blocked with plastered stones. You approach your hands, trembling slightly, as you hold your lamp closer to the surface. And there, pressed into the ancient plaster, are the seals. You recognize them instantly. The jackal and the 9 bound captives, the sign of the royal necropolis, the guardians of the dead. And beside it, fainter but unmistakable, is the seal bearing the name you have been chasing for years, Nebkepurur, the throne name of Tutankhamun. It is the tomb, and the seals are intact. In that moment, you understand. After centuries of looting, after decades of scientific excavation, you have found what no one else could: an untouched royal tomb. It is not a cache of scattered items. It is not a minor official's grave. It is the resting place of a pharaoh, sealed and silent. A part of you, the part driven by years of burning curiosity, wants to smash through the door right now. But the professional in you, the careful archaeologist who has dedicated his life to this, takes over. The find must be protected. You give the order, the most difficult order of your life, to backfill the staircase, to hide it once more from the world, from thieves, from the wind itself. That night, you ride to Luxor. The journey feels dreamlike. You are carrying the greatest secret in the archaeological world. You arrive at the telegraph office, and with a hand that still feels unsteady, you write the message to Lord Carnarvon in England. The words are simple, almost understated, but they carry the weight of history. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact, recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. You have sent the message across the world. And now you must wait. You return to the valley and stand guard over the hidden staircase, a silent watchman at a door that has not been opened for 3,000 years, wondering, with a terrifying, exhilarating awe, what lies on the other side of the silence. Chakchanroy de Lanoi Dung Chitiet Cho, Pan 3, Doan 3.9, Duak Mo Rong de Dapong Yu Calvado Dai. The next 2.5 weeks are the longest of your life. You have reburied the entrance, hiding the staircase under a blanket of sand and rock, posting guards day and night. You patrol the site like a nervous father, your mind racing. Every shadow looks like a thief. Every gust of wind sounds like a whisper of discovery that could bring unwanted attention. You have found the door to eternity, and now your entire world has shrunk to the size of this small, dusty patch of ground. You must protect it. Finally, on November 23rd, Lord Carnarvon arrives from England, his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert, by his side. The excitement is palpable, but you keep it contained. The world's press is stirring in Luxor and Cairo, sensing a major story, but they are kept at a distance. This moment, you decide, belongs to your small, dedicated team. The work to re-clear the staircase begins. The familiar rhythm of shovels and baskets returns, but this time it is not filled with the dread of failure, but with the electric tension of anticipation. The 16 steps are revealed once more. The plastered doorway with its ancient, unbroken seals stands waiting. You and your trusted foreman, Arthur Callender, carefully dismantle the upper portion of the doorway. Behind it lies a passage filled to the ceiling with rubble, a deliberate act by the ancient necropolis guards to deter thieves. It takes another full day of careful, backbreaking work to clear this passage. As the last of the rubble is carried out, you find yourselves standing before a second sealed door, identical to the first. This is the true entrance, the final barrier. The air in the narrow corridor is so still you can hear the blood pounding in your ears. This is the moment. With Lord Carnarvon, Lady Evelyn, and Callender crowded behind you in the tight space, you take a small, sharp iron rod. Not a large tool, just something to make a test hole in the upper left-hand corner. Your hand is steady, but your heart is a frantic drum. You push the rod forward. It meets the resistance of the ancient plaster, then the softer give of rubble, fill, and then nothing. It has punched through into empty space. You know now that the tomb is not a decoy. It is not a false burial. There is a chamber on the other side. Following ancient protocol and modern caution, you take a long candle. You widen the hole just enough to pass it through a test for foul gases that might have accumulated over 3 millennia. You light the candle, your hand shaking ever so slightly, and push it into the darkness. You watch the flame intently. It flickers wildly for a moment as the ancient stagnant air rushes out to meet the new, but then it holds steady, burning tall and clear. The air is old, but it is breathable. Lord Carnarvon stands directly behind you, his own breath held. "Can you see anything?" he asks, his voice, a strained whisper cracking with anticipation. You press your eye to the opening. At first, only darkness, a thick, velvety black that has not seen light since the time of the Exodus, since the days when Rome was just a small village on a hill. Your eyes, accustomed to the bright desert sun, struggle to adjust. But then, slowly, miraculously, forms begin to emerge from the gloom, like ghosts taking shape in the flickering candlelight. You see the glint of metal. No, not just a glint, but a wall of gold. Details begin to resolve themselves. The distinct shape of a couch, its legs carved like lions. The side of a dismantled chariot, its golden surface shimmering. Strange life-sized black statues, standing like sentinels, their foreheads adorned with the sacred cobra. Alabaster vases so thin and perfect they seem to glow from within. And chests, dozens of them inlaid with ivory and ebony piled one on top of the other in a state of what you can only describe as organized chaos. It is a storeroom of a god, a divine attic filled with the treasures of an eternal life, all jumbled together, as if the priests had just left yesterday. You are speechless. You are a scientist, an archaeologist, but in this moment you are simply a man staring into the face of a miracle. The sheer beauty and overwhelming reality of it robs you of words. Behind you, the silence is broken by Carnarvon's voice, more insistent this time, trembling with an excitement he can no longer contain. "Can you see anything?" You slowly pull your head back from the opening, turning to face him, your own voice barely a whisper, filled with an awe so profound it feels like a physical weight. You can only find 3 words. "Yes," you breathe. "Wonderful things." The tomb is sealed again, hidden once more beneath the sand, while you wait for the official permissions and equipment to arrive for the grand opening. In the long, quiet days of waiting, the desert begins to whisper. It does not speak in headlines or telegrams, not yet. It speaks in the ancient language of signs and omens. You, Howard Carter, have brought a spark of life into this land of the dead. A tiny golden canary kept in a cage at your house near the valley. Its cheerful song is a stark and beautiful contrast to the profound silence of the necropolis. It is your small companion, a flicker of warmth and sound in a world of dust and stone. To your Egyptian workers, it is more than a pet. They call it Asfur al-Zahab, the golden bird, and they see it as a talisman, a living symbol of the golden treasure. You seek, a sign that you are on the right path. They believe it brings you luck. The story does not come from you. It comes from your staff, whispered in the evening around their fires, a tale that grows with each telling. One day, while you are at the newly discovered tomb, overseeing the guards and planning the next steps, your houseboy returns to your quarters. The house is unusually quiet. The canary's constant singing has stopped. The boy enters your study and finds the small cage on the floor, its door slightly ajar. He peers inside, expecting to see the small golden bird sleeping. But he sees not the bird, but the reason for its silence. Coiled inside the cage, its scales dark and cool as a cobra. It is not just any snake. It is the uraeus, the sacred serpent that adorns the brow of every pharaoh's crown, the symbol of royalty, divinity, and fearsome protection. The snake turns its head, its black eyes unblinking, and then, with a flick of its tongue, it slithers out of the cage and disappears into a crack in the floor. The boy looks inside the cage again. The canary is gone. All that remains are a few scattered golden feathers. When the news spreads through your crew of workers, it is not treated as a strange, unfortunate accident. It is read as a sign, a powerful, undeniable omen. Their logic is simple and chillingly clear. The royal cobra, the sacred protector of the king, has emerged from the earth to strike down the golden bird that lived in the house of the man who had dared to disturb the pharaoh's eternal sleep. It is the first act of vengeance. The pharaoh is awake, they whisper to each other, and he is angry. You, a rational man of science, hear the story and dismiss it. It is a coincidence, a piece of desert folklore. A snake found its way into a house and ate a bird. It happens. You are saddened by the loss of your pet, but you do not see magic in it. You see only nature harsh and indifferent. But you are in the minority. The story has wings. It flies out of your small camp, travels down the Nile, to the bustling hotels of Luxor, and then to the newsrooms of Cairo. Journalists hungry for any scrap of information while they wait for the official opening seize upon it. It is the perfect detail, dramatic, symbolic, and steeped in mystery. And so, before a single newspaper has printed the words, Pharaoh's Curse, before a single human life is lost, the legend has found its first chapter. It begins not with a man's death, but with the death of a small golden bird, a sacrifice that the world was more than ready to believe was a warning. The whispers have begun. The tomb is not just a treasure chest, it is alive, and it is waiting. The world is celebrating. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb is the greatest story on the planet. Newspapers in London, New York, and Paris shout the names Carter and Carnarvon. You are no longer just an archaeologist and a nobleman. You are legends, the men who opened a window into eternity. The treasure you have uncovered is beyond imagination, and your fame is absolute. You, Lord Carnarvon, are on top of the world, planning museum tours, giving interviews, and basking in the golden glow of a success beyond your wildest dreams. But in Cairo, in the warm, languid air of an Egyptian spring, something small and insignificant is about to change everything. It begins, as so many tragedies do, with something you barely notice. A mosquito bite. During a visit to the tomb in the valley, a place of dust and heat and tiny persistent things that fly, you are bitten on the cheek. It's a minor annoyance, a small, itchy red mark that you dismiss with a wave of your hand. You have faced far greater dangers in your life: car crashes, wars, the perilous world of high-stakes gambling. What is a mosquito? Weeks later, you are back in the civilized comfort of your suite at the Continental Savoy Hotel in Cairo. You stand before a mirror preparing for your day. A servant has brought hot water. Your straight razor is sharp and clean. The daily ritual of shaving begins. Your hand is steady, your mind is on the day's plans. But as the blade glides across your cheek, it just catches the edge of the now healing mosquito bite. A small nick, a single drop of blood. You dab it with a cloth, annoyed but unconcerned. It is nothing, but it is not nothing. The next day you feel a chill, a deep weariness that the warm Cairo air cannot touch. The doctors are called. They are reassuring. A mild fever, they say, a touch of exhaustion. They prescribe rest, but the rest does not help. The day after the chill becomes a fire. The fever rages. Your cheek, where the razor slipped, begins to swell, turning a dark, angry red. You become delirious, tossing and turning in your bed, your mind filled with strange, fragmented dreams of the tomb. The infection spreads. It is no longer just in your skin. It has entered your blood. The doctors call it erysipelas, then blood poisoning. Today we would call it sepsis. They are helpless against it. In 1923, without antibiotics, they can only watch as the infection consumes you. Your daughter, Lady Evelyn, who stood beside you at the moment of discovery, now stands beside your bed, watching you fade. The end comes just after midnight on April 5th, 1923. The hotel room is silent, save for your shallow breathing. According to those present, you stir for a moment, your voice, a faint whisper. "I have heard the call," you say. "I am preparing." And then you are gone. At that exact moment, a strange thing happens. The lights across the entire city of Cairo flicker dim and die. A sudden, deep darkness swallows the city. A power failure, the electric company would say later. A coincidence? But in that hushed, candlelit hotel room, it feels like the world itself is holding its breath in acknowledgement. And the story doesn't end there. Thousands of miles away at your grand estate of Highclere Castle in England, another strange event is said to have occurred. Your favorite fox terrier Susie, who had been waiting faithfully for your return, suddenly sits up in the middle of the night, lets out a long, mournful howl, and falls over dead. A mosquito bite, a power outage, a dying dog. Separately, they are just sad, strange events. But together, woven by the eager hands of journalists and a public hungry for mystery, they are not a story. They are a verdict. The newspapers don't need any more proof. The world doesn't need any more proof. The curse of the Pharaohs has claimed its first and most famous victim. The legend is no longer a whisper. It is a roar that will echo across the century. The death of a lord is always news. But the death of this lord at this moment is not just news. It is a spark thrown into a barrel of dry tinder, and the world is about to watch it explode. To understand the firestorm that followed, you must first understand the world of 1920s journalism. It was a competitive, ruthless, and glorious age of newspapers. And Lord Carnarvon, a man who understood the value of a good story as much as he understood the thrill of a good gamble, had made a brilliant business move. He had sold the exclusive rights to the tomb's discovery to a single newspaper, the Times of London. This meant that only journalists from the Times were granted official access to the tomb. Only they could publish Howard Carter's official diary entries. Only they could take the first breathtaking photographs of the golden treasures as they were brought into the light. It was a journalistic coup. It was also, for every other newspaper in the world, a declaration of war. And you are a journalist for a rival paper, a popular daily with millions of readers, and you have been sent to Cairo with a single simple command: get the story. But the door is closed to you. You are shut out. You haunt the lobby of the Continental Savoy Hotel, hoping to catch a stray word from a member of the excavation team. You try to bribe servants for gossip. You interview tourists who claim they saw a strange shadow over the valley at dusk. You have deadlines, editors screaming for headlines, and you have nothing. Nothing but the same official dry press releases that everyone else gets. Then Lord Carnarvon dies, and in that moment of tragedy, you see your opening. The Times has the exclusive on the archaeology, on the gold, on the facts. But they don't have an exclusive on death. They don't have an exclusive on fear. You realize the real story isn't about what's inside the tomb. It's about what came out of it. You remember the whispers you heard from the Egyptian workers weeks ago, the story of the canary and the cobra. At the time, it was just a strange piece of local color. Now it is your lead. You write the story connecting the two events, the death of the golden bird and the death of the golden lord. You don't call it a fact. You call it a strange coincidence, a mysterious parallel, an eerie portent. Your newspaper prints it, and the world devours it. Suddenly, you are not shut out anymore. You have found a new angle, a story that the Times, with its commitment to sober scientific reporting, cannot and will not touch. You have the curse. The floodgates open. You and your fellow journalists, free from the constraints of official access, begin to build the legend, piece by piece. You interview spiritualists in London who claim to have contacted Carnarvon's spirit. You find distant relatives of the crew who talk of nightmares and premonitions. Every minor accident, every illness, every misfortune connected, however tenuously, to the tomb becomes a headline. Pharaoh's vengeance strikes from the grave. Was it the mosquito's bite or the mummy's curse? Scientists baffled, Egypt's ancient magic vindicated. You are no longer reporting on an archaeological find. You are crafting a supernatural thriller, and the public cannot get enough. They don't want a dry inventory of ancient artifacts. They want a ghost story, a battle between modern science and ancient magic, and you and your colleagues are more than happy to provide it. And so, in the bustling, ink-stained newsrooms of Cairo, London, and New York, a legend was forged. Not from ancient spells, but from modern headlines. Not from the power of a pharaoh, but from the power of the press. The curse was no longer a superstition whispered by workers in a dusty valley. It was a global phenomenon, a story so compelling, so perfect, that it would forever overshadow the quiet, wonderful truth of what lay inside that small, silent tomb. Back in the West, the world watches. After Lord Carnarvon, the curse was no longer a question. It had become an answer, an explanation waiting for more questions. The world began to watch, not with simple curiosity, but with a kind of grim, fascinated anticipation, waiting for the next victim to fall. And the newspapers, having found their perfect story, were ready to connect any dot, no matter how distant. You are no longer in the dusty valley. You are in London, or New York, or Paris, reading the morning paper over a cup of coffee. The story of the tomb unfolds for you now, piece by piece, an international drama playing out in black and white print. Every few months it seems there is a new name, a new tragedy, another thread, woven into the growing tapestry of the Pharaoh's revenge. The next name you read is Gould. George J. Gould, the American railroad magnate, a man of immense wealth and power, a man who could buy anything in the world except it seemed immunity. He'd visited Egypt drawn by the allure of the discovery. You see the photographs of him at the tomb's entrance looking confident, modern, untouchable. He breathes the ancient air. He perhaps even touches the golden walls. Months later, back in the luxury of the French Riviera, far from the Egyptian sun, he develops a fever. It quickly worsens. He dies of pneumonia. The headlines are immediate and triumphant. Curse of the Pharaohs claims millionaire. No one mentions, of course, that Mr. Gould had been in frail health for some time. No one mentions that pneumonia was a common and often fatal illness in the 1920s, long before antibiotics. The story is simpler, cleaner, more terrifying this way. He entered the tomb, and now he is dead. Then comes the story of the prince. An Egyptian prince, Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, who had also visited the tomb. His story is even more dramatic. Weeks after his visit, in a lavish suite at the Savoy Hotel in London, he is shot and killed. The culprit? His own wife, a Frenchwoman named Marguerite. The papers have a field day. It wasn't just a domestic dispute, they suggest. It was the Pharaoh's magic driving a tormented woman to madness. The curse had found a new, more intimate way to strike. The court records, when you can find them buried on the back pages, tell a different story. A sad, human story of a turbulent and abusive marriage. A story of desperation, not demons. But no one is interested in that story. The curse is better. Even the scientists, the men of reason, are not immune. You read the name Arthur Mace, a respected archaeologist, a crucial member of Carter's own team. He was the one who helped Carter carefully dismantle the wall to the burial chamber. He worked for years in the tomb's antechamber, meticulously preserving fragile artifacts. Then he complains of exhaustion. He retires due to ill health and dies of pleurisy in 1928. Another victim, the papers cry. The curse is working its way through the excavation team, one by one. The reports don't emphasize that he died a full 5 years after the tomb was opened, or that he had spent his entire career working in dusty, poorly ventilated conditions, a profession known for its respiratory hazards. The details are inconvenient. The pattern is what matters, and so the list grows. Wolf Joel, a South African millionaire, is murdered in Johannesburg after a visit. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, dies of a mysterious illness. Richard Bethel Carter's personal secretary is found dead in his bed. Each death, no matter how logical or distant, is another log on the fire. The story is now too powerful to be stopped by facts. It has a life of its own. It is a ghost haunting not the tomb in the valley, but the minds of millions who look on in fascinated terror, waiting to see who the pharaoh will choose next. The world has its ghost story, a perfect, chilling tale of a phantom pharaoh reaching from beyond the grave to claim his revenge. It's a story whispered in drawing rooms and shouted in newspaper headlines. It feels true because it is dramatic, because it gives meaning to tragedy. But in the quiet, gaslit laboratories of London and Cairo, far from the public frenzy, another quieter story begins to form. It is a story not of magic, but of medicine. Not of spirits, but of spores. You are a physician, or perhaps a biologist in the 1920s. You read the headlines about the curse with a growing sense of skepticism. You are a man of science of reason. You do not see a phantom hunting its victims. You see a puzzle. And you begin to ask a different question, a question no journalist is asking. What was actually in that tomb? Not the gold, not the jewels, not the chariots. What was in the air? Imagine a room, a small stone room sealed completely from the outside world. No fresh air has entered it. No sunlight has touched its walls. No rain has washed its floors. It has been locked in perfect, absolute stillness for 3,200 years. It is a perfect time capsule. But what has been sealed inside? It's not just treasure. It is a feast for things that grow in the dark. You think of the contents. The wooden furniture slowly releasing gases. The woven linen sheets, the baskets of dried fruits, grains, and meats, left as offerings for the king's eternal journey. The flowers, long since turned to dust, but their pollen and organic matter remain. Even the resins, the sacred oils, and the natron salt used on the mummy itself. All of it is organic material, and over 30 centuries in that sealed, dark, and stable environment, life doesn't just die. It waits. Microscopic life, bacteria, fungi, and molds that were present on the objects on the food on the very clothes of the priests who sealed the tomb away. In the absence of light and disturbance, these organisms enter a state of suspended animation. They become spores, tiny resilient particles of life, sleeping, waiting for one thing, a change in their environment. And then, after 3 millennia, you and Carter and Carnarvon arrive. You stand before the sealed door. You make a small hole. The first breath of outside air, in over 3,000 years, rushes in. It is a shock to the tomb's ancient delicate system. The change in pressure, the sudden influx of humidity from the breath of living men, the new rush of oxygen. For the dormant life within it is a signal. It is an alarm clock ringing across 30 centuries. It is time to wake up. A cloud of invisible particles, ancient dust, and sleeping spores that have been waiting since the time of Moses billows out into the narrow corridor. It settles on the skin and clothes of the explorers. It enters their lungs with every excited, awe-filled breath. You, the scientist, sit in your study, and a new hypothesis begins to form, one born of logic, not legend. The curse is not supernatural. It is biological. The tomb was not protected by magic. It was protected by its own ancient microscopic ecosystem. And these men, in their moment of greatest triumph, may have unknowingly inhaled their own doom. This idea is not as romantic as a pharaoh's wrath. It does not sell newspapers. But it is perhaps even more unsettling. The thought that the past itself can be toxic, that history can carry a fever, and that the true curse wasn't written on the walls but was simply waiting silent and patient in the very air they were breathing. The air was the weapon. The moment the seal was broken, the past was released. But what was the poison hiding within that ancient breath? Modern science, looking back through the lens of microbiology, has given these invisible killers names. They are not demons or vengeful spirits. They are fungi, bacteria, and pathogens far older and more patient than any phantom. You are a microbiologist now, looking at this case, not as a historian, but as a detective. You take a hypothetical sample of the air from that tomb just as it was in 1923. You place it under a powerful microscope. And in that magnified world, you see them. Tiny, almost translucent spores, shaped like microscopic seeds. And you recognize a prime suspect, a common, but sometimes deadly, fungus, Aspergillus. Aspergillus is everywhere in our world, on decaying leaves, in dusty corners, on old bread. In an open environment, it is mostly harmless. But in the unique ecosystem of a sealed Egyptian tomb, it is a different beast entirely. For 3,000 years, in the perfect darkness, with stable humidity and an abundance of organic material to feed on the grains, the oils, the linen, the wood, certain strains like Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavus could have thrived, multiplied, and then gone dormant, waiting. When the tomb was opened, these spores would have become airborne, a fine, invisible dust cloud. To a healthy person, inhaling a few might cause a minor allergic reaction, a cough, a tightness in the chest. But to someone with a compromised immune system, it is a declaration of war. The infection that follows is called aspergillosis. The spores colonize the lungs, growing into a fungal mass causing persistent coughing fever and a relentless fatigue that medicine in the 1920s could not explain, and certainly could not cure. And this is where the story of Lord Carnarvon becomes not a mystery, but a tragic medical case study. You pull up his history. He was not a robust man. Years before his trip to Egypt, he was involved in a serious automobile accident in Germany that left him with chronically weakened lungs and fragile health. His immune system was already fighting a quiet long-term battle. He was in medical terms the perfect host. The mosquito bite on his cheek was the trigger, but not the cause. When he cut the bite while shaving, it created an open wound, a gateway for a common bacterial infection, like Staphylococcus. This initial infection, what they called blood poisoning, would have sent his already weakened immune system into overdrive, leaving his body, especially his damaged lungs, vulnerable. He was in a weakened state when he entered the tomb. He breathed in the ancient, spore-laden air. The Aspergillus spores found a welcoming home in his lungs, a place where they could grow unchecked. His final illness, described as pneumonia, was very likely a severe case of pulmonary aspergillosis. The curse didn't need magic. All it needed was a mosquito eraser and a man whose body was already predisposed to failure. But Aspergillus was not likely alone in that ancient air. Other bacteria, like Pseudomonas and various actinomycetes, are known to survive in dormant states for centuries. They too could have been released, causing a cocktail of infections that would have baffled the doctors of the day. Archaeologists and spelunkers even have a modern name for this phenomenon: cave disease, or histoplasmosis, a lung infection caused by fungus found in bat or bird droppings, which could have easily been present in the tomb's outer passages. So the curse was real in a way. It did travel on swift wings, the invisible wings of airborne spores. It did bring death to the one who disturbed the tomb, or at least the one man who was most susceptible. The pharaoh didn't need to cast a spell. He had biology on his side, and in that silent, sealed chamber, he had cultivated the perfect patient and entirely natural poison. So there was a killer in the tomb, a real biological threat, silent and patient, lurking in the ancient air. The science is logical. It is clean. It provides a rational explanation for a series of unfortunate events. But another, perhaps more powerful curse was at work. This curse did not live in the dust of the valley, but in the minds of millions. It was the curse of belief. Let's leave the laboratory and the microscope behind for a moment. Let's step out of the world of hard facts and into the world of feeling, of intuition, of fear. Imagine you are an ordinary person living in London in the year 1923. You are not a scientist or an archaeologist. You are a clerk, a shopkeeper, a mother. You open your morning paper, and for weeks the only story that seems to matter is the one from Egypt. You see the dramatic photographs of the golden treasures. You read the breathless prose describing a world sealed away for 3 millennia. The story is intoxicating, a perfect escape from your post-war world of rationing and recovery. You read the story of the little golden canary swallowed by a royal cobra on the very day the tomb was breached. A chill runs down your spine. It feels significant. It feels like an omen. Then you read about the shock and sudden death of the wealthy and famous Lord Carnarvon. You read about the citywide blackout in Cairo that coincided with the moment of his passing. You read about his dog thousands of miles away, howling and dying in the same hour. Your rational mind might tell you, these are all just tragic coincidences. But another part of you, a quieter, older part, disagrees. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine. We are wired to find meaning in chaos, to connect dots, to tell stories that make sense of a world that often doesn't. And the story of a vengeful pharaoh reaching from beyond the grave to punish those who defiled his eternal rest is a much better story than a man dying from an infected insect bite. It has drama. It has justice. It has magic. Now that you believe your world changes, you are no longer just reading the news. You are looking for evidence to confirm what you already feel is true. Every new piece of information is now filtered through the lens of the curse. You hear that another member of the team has fallen ill. You don't ask about his medical history or his working conditions. You nod knowingly. The curse, you whisper to your neighbor. It's taking them one by one. You see a photograph of Howard Carter in the newspaper, his face looking tired and strained. You don't see a man exhausted from a decade of hard labor and immense pressure. You see a man being haunted, a man living on borrowed time. Every misfortune, every stumble, every piece of bad luck becomes another brick in the wall of the legend. And you must remember the world you are living in. It is a world still reeling from the Great War, a world that has seen death on an industrial, meaningless scale. Millions have vanished into the mud of France and Belgium, taken by machines and disease. In this new world, science and reason have led to unimaginable slaughter, so people turn elsewhere for answers. This is the age of spiritualism, of seances, of trying to contact the dead. People want to believe that the spirit world is real, that the dead are not truly gone, that they still have power. The idea of a pharaoh's spirit, his powerful Ka, reaching across 3,000 years to exact revenge. It doesn't seem so strange. In a world full of ghosts, what is one more? And so the curse took root and flourished. It was watered by grief, fed by fear, and nurtured by the very human need to believe that there is order in chaos, that death is not always random, and that some doors, ancient and sacred, are not meant to be opened. The tomb didn't need to be haunted. The minds of millions already were. Your mind is a wonderful, and sometimes a terrible thing. It is not a perfect mirror of the world. It is a storyteller. It takes the chaotic, random events of life and weaves them into a narrative that makes sense. And like any good storyteller, it knows which details to keep and which to discard to make a tale more compelling. This is the secret engine of the curse, a quiet, powerful force we now call confirmation bias. It works like this. Imagine you believe that black cats are unlucky. One day a black cat crosses your path, and an hour later you trip and spill your coffee. Your brain instantly forges a connection. See, it whispers, proof. The cat caused the accident. But your brain, in its eagerness to prove the story right, conveniently forgets the 100 other times a black cat has crossed your path and absolutely nothing happened. It forgets the dozens of times you've spilled your coffee for no reason at all, simply because you were clumsy. It filters reality to fit the story it wants to tell. It notices the hits and ignores the misses. Now apply this to the tomb of Tutankhamun. The world, after the dramatic death of Lord Carnarvon, decided to believe in a story of supernatural revenge, and so it began to collect proof. Every time a person remotely connected to the dig died, no matter how old they were, how sick they had been, or how far away they lived, it was another fact added to the file. Another black cat, another spilled coffee. Each tragedy became a testament to the pharaoh's power. But what about the evidence that didn't fit the story? What about all the misses? The mind, in its love for a good narrative, simply discards them. They become invisible. Let's look at the man at the very center of it all. Howard Carter. If the curse were real, if some malevolent force had been truly unleashed from that tomb, he should have been the first to fall. He was the one who drilled the hole. He was the first human to breathe that ancient air in over 3 millennia. He spent the next decade of his life inside that tomb, day after day, cataloging, touching, and breathing in the very essence of the pharaoh's eternal home. He handled every golden object, unwrapped the mummy himself, and gazed upon the face of the boy king. And yet, he did not die. Not of a mysterious fever. Not in a strange, inexplicable accident. Howard Carter lived for 16 more years, dying of natural causes lymphoma, in England in 1939 at the age of 64. His death was quiet, sad, and completely uncursed. And what of Lady Evelyn Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's daughter? She was there beside Carter, one of the first 3 people to peer into the antechamber. She was young, and by all accounts, just as exposed to the tomb's magic as her father. Did the curse take her? No. She lived a long and full life, passing away peacefully in 1980 at the age of 79. They were not alone. Of the 26 people officially present at the opening of the burial chamber, only 6 died within the next decade. Of the 10 who were there when the heavy granite lid of the sarcophagus was lifted, only 2 died in the following 10 years. The numbers simply don't support the story. They tell a tale of normal human mortality. The curse was never a tally of all the facts. It was a carefully curated collection of the most dramatic, most tragic, and most compelling ones. The human mind, like a good newspaper editor, knew that a spooky story sells better than a boring statistic. It chose to remember the coincidences and forget the contradictions. And in doing so, it kept the pharaoh's ghost alive, not through magic, but through the simple, powerful, and very human art of selective memory. You might think that what made Tutankhamun's tomb so special, so dangerous, was the powerful curse said to be guarding it. The world certainly believes so. But what if I told you that in the grand silent library of Egyptian tombs, Tutankhamun's was actually quiet? What if I told you that other tombs had warnings far more terrifying, far more explicit, and yet no one remembers their names? Let's step away from the golden glamour of Tutankhamun for a moment. You are now in a quiet archive, far from the desert sun. Before you are the records of other excavations, stories that never made the headlines, curses that never found their legend. You unroll a fragile copy of the inscriptions from the mastaba of Kentika Ikeki, a vizier from the 6th dynasty who lived 1,000 years before Tutankhamun. His tomb was not for a king, but for a high official, yet his warning is anything but subtle. You read the translated hieroglyphs, your finger tracing the ancient words, "As for all men who shall enter this my tomb, impure, there will be judgment. An end shall be made for him. I shall seize his neck like a bird. I shall cast the fear of myself into him, that the living on earth may see, and may fear the spirits of the revered dead. I shall seize his neck like a bird." The language is violent, direct, and personal. It is far more threatening than anything found in Tutankhamun's tomb. And yet, what happened when this tomb was discovered and excavated in the early 20th century? Nothing. No headlines of mysterious deaths. No whispers of a vizier's vengeful spirit. The archaeologists went home, wrote their scholarly reports, and lived to old age. The curse remained silent, a threat without a story. You turn to another record, that of Harkhuf, a governor of Upper Egypt from the Old Kingdom. His tomb inscription is a different kind of warning. It does not threaten physical violence. It promises spiritual and legal retribution. It warns that anyone who damages his tomb will be judged for it in the great court of the afterlife before the great God. It is a threat of eternal consequence, not immediate doom. When explorers found his tomb, they documented it. They did not die of strange fevers. Their dogs did not howl at midnight. The world did not notice. Or consider the tomb of Anktifi, a governor from the first intermediate period. His warning is perhaps the most chilling of all. He directly threatens to use his power as a spirit, an AKH, to haunt any future ruler who dares to do evil to his chapel or his coffin. A ghost. A direct threat from beyond the grave, promising to twist the neck of any violator. And yet, when his tomb was studied, the ghost remained a ghost. The curse slept. So why did Tutankhamun's tomb, one with no explicit, terrifying curse text, become the center of a global legend? The answer has nothing to do with magic. It has everything to do with timing. Tutankhamun's discovery was a perfect storm. It came at the dawn of the age of mass media, when newspapers were locked in fierce competition. It was the first time a nearly intact royal pharaonic tomb had ever been found, making it an unprecedented global event. It had a famous, charismatic, and wealthy sponsor in Lord Carnarvon. And most importantly, it had a perfectly timed, tragic, and seemingly inexplicable death to serve as its inciting incident. The curse of Tutankhamun was never about the power of the pharaoh. It was about the power of narrative. It was a story that had all the right ingredients: a lost boy, king, mountains of gold, a mysterious death, and a world hungry for a ghost story. The other curses, the forgotten ones, the ones that were arguably far more menacing, simply lacked a good publicist. They remained what they always were: ancient warnings, legal threats, whispers in stone unheard by a world that was waiting for a scream. We have talked about the living things in the tomb, the mold, the bacteria, the patient spores waiting in the dark. But what about the non-living things, the chemicals, the minerals, the very elements used by the ancient priests to cheat death and preserve a body for eternity? For the tomb held other quieter poisons, ones that did not need to be alive to be deadly. You are a chemist now, a toxicologist looking at this case through a modern lens. You are not interested in the beauty of an artifact, but in its composition. In your mind, you take a small sample of the dark, hardened resin from the edge of a golden coffin. You scrape a bit of the fine dust from the bottom of an alabaster canopic jar. You are looking for the chemical fingerprints left behind by the ancient embalmers. The mummification process was a masterpiece of preservative chemistry. At its heart was natron, a natural salt mixture harvested from the dry lake beds of Egypt. It is a powerful desiccant, a substance that draws out every drop of moisture. For 40 days, the body of the pharaoh would have been packed inside and out with bags of this salt, slowly dehydrating the flesh until it was as dry and sterile as the desert itself. While not highly toxic, the fine alkaline dust from the natron would have filled the air in the tomb, a severe and constant irritant to the lungs of anyone who entered. But the priests used more than just salt. They used resins and oils harvested from cedar pine and fir trees. These were used to coat the linen wrappings, creating a hard, protective shell around the mummy. These resins have powerful antibacterial properties, which is why they were chosen. But over millennia, in a sealed environment, they also slowly break down, releasing volatile organic compounds into the air. When Carter's team broke the seal, they would have been hit with a wave of these ancient chemical fumes, a faint chemical perfume that could cause headaches, dizziness, and respiratory irritation. And sometimes the priests used stronger materials. The pigments used to paint the vibrant murals on the walls and the details on the coffins were made from ground minerals. The brilliant red could contain mercury sulfide, the bright yellow orpiment a form of arsenic sulfide. The white could be made from lead carbonate. These are heavy metals. They do not decay. They do not lose their toxicity. They wait. Over 3,000 years, microscopic particles of this paint would have flaked off, settling as a fine, invisible dust on every surface. Inhaling this dust day after day could lead to slow, cumulative poisoning. The symptoms would have been vague and mysterious to doctors in the 1920s: fatigue, nerve pain, organ damage, a slow, inexplicable wasting sickness. And the tomb itself held its own natural dangers. The Valley of the Kings is carved from limestone, a rock that can sometimes contain deposits of uranium. As uranium decays over millennia, it releases radon, a naturally occurring radioactive gas. In an open space, radon harmlessly disperses into the atmosphere, but in a sealed underground chamber, it can accumulate to dangerous levels. Prolonged exposure to radon is a known cause of lung cancer. Finally, let us not forget the uninvited guests. While Tutankhamun's burial chamber was sealed, it's possible that the outer passages were home to colonies of bats for centuries before they were blocked by rubble. Bat droppings or guano can harbor a dangerous fungus called Histoplasma capsulatum. When disturbed, its spores become airborne. If inhaled, they can cause a severe lung infection called histoplasmosis, with symptoms that closely mimic pneumonia. So you see, the air in that tomb was not just old. It was a complex, invisible cocktail of potential threats: fungal spores, ancient bacteria, chemical dust from heavy metals, and naturally occurring radioactive gas. Any one of these could have been enough to sicken a vulnerable person. Together, they formed a perfect natural trap, a silent and scientific curse. The pharaoh did not need magic to protect his rest. The very science of his burial and the geology of his eternal home did it for him. The ancient curse, born of whispers, magic, and mystery, has largely faded. It has been explained by science, analyzed by psychology, and immortalized as a legend. But a new curse has taken its place, one that is slower, quieter, and far more relentless. This is the curse of being loved, the curse of being seen. You are no longer an explorer or a journalist. You are a conservator, a modern guardian of the ancient world. You stand in a narrow burial chamber, not unlike Tutankhamun's. The air is warm and heavy, but not with the stillness of millennia. It is heavy with the presence of the living. Your enemy is not a phantom pharaoh. It is the human breath. You watch as a line of tourists files slowly through the passageway. They are filled with awe, their faces upturned, their phones held high, capturing images of the vibrant paintings on the walls. They do not mean any harm. They have traveled across the world to be here to witness this miracle. But they are unintentionally destroying it. With every exhale, each person releases moisture into the dry desert air of the tomb. You can see the reading on your small digital sensor. The humidity inside spikes, creating a microclimate the tomb was never designed to endure. This moisture is a slow, insidious poison. It is absorbed by the porous limestone walls, which are filled with natural salts. As the tomb's air cycles and the moisture evaporates, the salt crystallizes, expanding with a force that is microscopic but unstoppable. You look closely at the wall at a beautiful painting of the goddess Isis spreading her protective wings. And you can see it. Tiny, almost invisible flakes of paint, no bigger than a grain of sand, lifting away from the stone. The tomb is literally flaking away one breath at a time. And it's not just the breath. It's everything that comes with a living body. Lint from their clothes, microscopic fibers of cotton, and polyester settles on the murals, providing a new feast for kinds of mold and bacteria that the ancient world never knew. The collective heat from their bodies changes the tomb's delicate stable temperature, accelerating chemical decay. The vibrations from their thousands of footsteps, day after day, year after year, create microfissures in the ancient, fragile plaster. The damage from decades of flash photography, now banned, has permanently faded some of the most brilliant pigments, bleaching history into a paler version of itself. So, you, the conservator, fight back. You are a modern priest performing modern rituals of preservation. You install sophisticated ventilation systems that circulate the air and control humidity. You erect thick glass barriers, creating a space between our world and theirs. You limit the number of visitors allowed inside each day and the number of minutes they can stay, turning a sacred experience into a timed event. And you support the most radical solution of all, the replica. Not far from the Valley of the Kings, a perfect 1-to-1 scale replica of Tutankhamun's tomb has been created. It was built using lasers and 3D printers. Every crack in the plaster, every brushstroke on the wall, recreated with breathtaking accuracy. It allows people to experience the wonder without harming the original. But as you stand in the quiet of the real tomb, you can't help but wonder. Is a copy the same? Does it hold the same weight, the same silence, the same soul? The modern curse continues. It is a curse born not of malice, but of admiration. A curse fueled by our own deep human desire to connect with the past. We are no longer robbing the tombs of their gold. We are robbing them of their silence, their stability, their time. In our quest to see eternity, we are speeding up its decay. We are loving these sacred places to death. And perhaps that is the most tragic curse of all. The curse of decay brought on by our own breath and presence is slow and silent. But there is another curse that plagues the treasures of Tutankhamun. It is a curse that is loud, political, and as heavy as solid gold. This is the curse of possession, the burden of the treasure itself. You are no longer an explorer or a scientist. You are a museum curator, a modern guardian. You walk through the quiet, climate-controlled halls of the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Your responsibility is staggering. Before you lies a collection of over 300 objects recovered from that one small tomb. A collection so vast, so precious, that it has taken a century to fully study, conserve, and display. You look at a pair of the king's linen gloves, so fragile they seem like they could dissolve with a breath. You see his childhood toys, his hunting bows, his sandals made of woven reeds and papyrus, their straps worn from use. These are not just artifacts. They are the intimate, tangible pieces of a life. And your job is to protect them from the one thing more destructive than time, the modern world. Each object requires a specific environment, a precise level of humidity to keep ancient wood from cracking, a controlled temperature to prevent delicate textiles from becoming brittle, a light level so low and specific that it will not fade the ancient pigments. To fail in this task is to allow 3,000 years of history to turn to dust on your watch. The financial cost of this preservation is immense. The emotional weight is even greater. Then comes the request from a famous museum in New York or Paris or Tokyo. A request for a world tour. The treasures of Tutankhamun. It will bring in millions of dollars in revenue. It will share the glory of Egypt with the world. It will foster international diplomacy, but it is also an unimaginable risk. You sit in meetings where the debate rages. How do you pack a 3,300-year-old golden chariot for a transatlantic flight? How do you insure an object that is literally priceless? What if there is an accident? A fire? A theft? The curators argue that the artifacts are too fragile to move. The politicians argue that they are too important to keep hidden. You feel the crushing weight of the dilemma. The very fame that makes these objects special also puts them in constant peril. And beneath that debate lies a deeper, more painful question. Who truly owns these things? For a century during the colonial era, Egypt's treasures were treated as a global commodity, unearthed by Europeans and shipped off to fill the halls of museums in London and Berlin. The Rosetta Stone. The key to Egypt's own language sits in the British Museum. The iconic bust of Nefertiti resides in Germany. Now a new generation of Egyptians sees these treasures not as global heritage, but as their inalienable national soul, a history that was taken from them and which they are now fighting to protect and, in some cases, reclaim. And, at the center of it all, is the mask, the golden death mask of Tutankhamun. You stand before it, separated by layers of climate-controlled bulletproof glass. It is impossibly beautiful. The deep blue of the lapis lazuli, the serene, youthful face of the boy king, the sheer weight of 24 pounds of solid gold. It is the most famous object on Earth. But you, the curator, see something else. You see the burden. It is not just a work of art. It is a symbol of national identity, a multi-billion-dollar tourist attraction, a political statement, and a constant high-level security headache. It is a magnet for wonder and for greed. It is a blessing and a curse. The pharaoh was buried with his riches to aid his journey into the afterlife. He could never have imagined that in our world they would become a burden so heavy that even an entire nation struggles to carry it. This is the weight of gold. The treasure that brought Tutankhamun eternal fame has also brought his protectors an eternal worry. The story of the curse has now traveled from a dusty tomb in Egypt to the sensational headlines of newspapers to the hushed, fearful conversations in drawing rooms across the world. But its final journey would be its most powerful and its most permanent. It was a journey into a new kind of darkness, a new kind of light, the flickering silver light of the cinema. It is now 1932. The Great Depression has a grip on the world. You seek escape a few hours of shared darkness in a grand movie palace. And as you sit in that velvet theater seat, watching the flickering black and white images, you see it. An archaeologist reads from a forbidden scroll. In a dusty sarcophagus, a pair of eyes closed for 700 years slowly, terrifyingly opens. In that moment, you feel it. A collective gasp ripples through the audience. The curse is no longer a distant story in a newspaper. It is here. It is alive, breathing on the silver screen. The film, The Mummy, takes the legend and gives it a face, a voice, and a motive, forbidden love and eternal revenge. For generations to come, this will be their first introduction to ancient Egypt, not through a history book, but through a monster movie. The legend has left the tomb. It has left the headlines. It has now entered our dreams, becoming an immortal part of our collective imagination. The film was a massive success, not because it was historically accurate, but because it tapped directly into the public's existing belief in the curse of the pharaohs. It took the newspaper headlines and gave them a face, a voice, and a motive: forbidden love and eternal revenge. In the film, Imhotep is a creature of deep passion, of ancient power, of supernatural wrath. In reality, the mummy of Tutankhamun was the fragile, almost pathetic body of a disabled boy king who likely died from a simple infection. But the world wasn't interested in that quiet, sad truth. It wanted the monster. And Hollywood delivered again and again. For the next century, the curse of the mummy became a genre of its own. There were sequels, remakes, and comedies. From the classic horror of the 1930s and 40s to the campy adventures of the 1990s starring Brendan Fraser, the story remained the same: disturb the tomb, awaken the mummy, and run for your life. For generations of children and adults, the first introduction to ancient Egypt was not through a history book. It was through a monster movie. The reality of Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife, a peaceful, orderly journey to a paradise called the Field of Reeds, was replaced by a narrative of horror traps and undead guardians. The archaeologist was no longer a scientist. He was the fool who digs too deep and unleashes evil upon the world. And so, the curse achieves its final, most powerful form. It leaves the realm of history entirely and enters the realm of modern myth. It no longer needs facts or coincidences to survive. It is now powered by something far more potent, our imagination. The pharaoh may be dust his treasures behind glass, but his ghost, the one created by Hollywood, still walks among us wrapped in bandages and celluloid forever. The story is complete. The legend is immortal. Your physical body, the one that toiled under the sun and ate the gritty bread, is gone. It lies wrapped in pure white linen, safe, you hope, in its silent tomb. But you are not gone. You are spirit. You are Ba, the bird-headed soul of your personality, and you are Ka, the ethereal double of your life force. And your final, most important journey has just begun. You find yourself being led by the gentle, steady hand of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the guide of the dead. He leads you into a place of profound silence and awe, the Hall of Two Truths. The hall is impossibly vast, its great columns reaching up into a darkness that seems to have no ceiling. It is silent save for the faint, almost imperceptible rustling sound of papyrus. Seated in a long, imposing row are 42 divine judges, each with the head of a different beast or god. They are not here to question you. They are here to listen. This is your moment of judgment. You must now address each of them by name and declare your innocence of a specific sin. This is the negative confession. Your voice, now a thing of spirit, echoes in the great hall. Hail, Usek Nemtet, who comes forth from Heliopolis, I have not committed sin. Hail Fenty, who comes forth from Kamenu, I have not stolen. Hail Nehahau, who comes forth from Restau, I have not slain men and women. You continue down the line, disavowing every crime, every falsehood, every act of cruelty. I have not caused any to weep. I have not spoken lies. I have not been deceitful. Your entire life is laid bare in this solemn, rhythmic declaration. You are testifying on behalf of your own soul. When the confession is complete, Anubis leads you to the center of the hall. Before you stands a magnificent golden scale, its beam polished to a mirror's shine, resting in perfect, delicate balance. Anubis, with a touch as gentle as a priest's, reaches into your spiritual form and takes your heart. Not the physical organ, but its ethereal essence, the Ib, the seat of your intelligence, your emotions, your conscience. It is the record of every choice you ever made. He places it on one pan of the scale. On the other pan, he places a single white ostrich feather. It is the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. It is weightless, yet it holds the weight of the entire universe. The great god Thoth, with the head of an ibis and the palette of a scribe in his hand, stands ready to record the verdict, and beside the scale, waiting patiently, sits the most terrifying creature in the Egyptian underworld, Ammit, the devourer of the dead. Her head is that of a crocodile, her forequarters are those of a lion, and her hindquarters are those of a hippopotamus. She is a chimera of the three deadliest creatures the Egyptians knew. She waits, she is always hungry. Anubis releases the scale. A slow, agonizing creak of gold fills the hall. Your entire existence, every memory, every secret hangs in the balance. You watch breathless as the two pans sway. If your heart is pure, if your life was lived in accordance with Ma'at, your heart will be as light as the feather. The scale will balance. A wave of relief so profound, it feels like a second birth, will wash over your soul. Thoth will record your name in the book of the worthy. The great god, Osiris, Lord of the afterlife, will nod his divine approval, and the path to the field of reeds, to eternal paradise, will open before you. But what if it does not balance? What if the weight of a single lie, a single act of cruelty, a single moment of greed tips the scale, your heart heavy with sin, sinks lower than the feather? There is no appeal. There is no mercy. Ammit rises, her crocodile snout opens, and your soul, your very consciousness is devoured, ceasing to exist for all time. This is the second death, the true death. Oblivion. This was the true Egyptian curse. Not a spell carved on a wall to frighten thieves, but the ever-present, deeply ingrained knowledge that every action, every word, every thought was being recorded, and that in the end you would have to face the scales alone, your heart in one hand, truth in the other. You stand before the scales of judgment, your soul laid bare. The trial is terrifying, the stakes absolute. But the ancient Egyptians, in their profound and practical wisdom, believed you did not have to face it unprepared. You were not expected to walk into the Hall of Two Truths empty-handed. You could bring a guide, a map. It was not a single book, not in the way we think of one, but a personalized papyrus scroll of spells and prayers, a collection of sacred cheat sheets for the afterlife. This was the Book of the Dead. It was not a single book in the way we think of one. There was no single definitive version. Instead, it was a personalized collection of spells, hymns, and incantations written on a long roll of papyrus and tailored to the individual who would carry it into the next world, and it was not cheap. You are a nobleman now, a man of wealth and status in Thebes. You are planning for your death as meticulously as you would plan for the construction of a new villa. You visit the Pharaohs, the House of Life, the temple workshop, where the finest scribes in the land practice their sacred art. The air here smells of fresh papyrus and black ink, ground from soot and acacia gum. You sit with a high priest and you choose the spells you think you will need most on your perilous journey through the Duat, the underworld. There is a spell to give you back your mouth so you can speak to the gods. A spell to keep your head from being severed by demons. A spell to transform your soul into a swift falcon or a beautiful lotus flower, allowing you to travel freely between worlds. And a spell to remember your own name, for to forget your name in the afterlife was to cease to exist. You watch for months as the scribe works. His hand does not shake. He writes in beautiful flowing hieroglyphs, each symbol not just a letter but a sacred image in itself. Beside his writing, an artist adds vibrant illustrations called vignettes. You see yourself painted in your finest white linen, standing confidently before Osiris. You see the monstrous Ammit waiting patiently by the scales, and you see the glorious sunboat ready to carry your soul across the sky with Ra. This is not just a scroll, it is your personalized guide to resurrection. But the real power is in the words. The spells are your passwords, your defensive words, your legal arguments before the divine court. The most crucial spell of all is the one addressed to your own heart. For the Egyptians believed that your heart, the seat of your conscience, could testify against you. And so when your journey on earth is over, and your body has been perfectly mummified, the priest will perform the final ritual. They will take your precious papyrus scroll and carefully place it within your linen wrappings, often resting it directly upon your heart. Tucked beside you is spell 30b, a final desperate plea to your own conscience. As you lie in eternal stillness, the words are meant to echo in your soul. O my heart which I had from my mother, O my heart of my different ages, do not stand up against me as a witness. Do not create opposition against me in the presence of the keeper of the balance. Do not tell lies against me in the presence of the great God, the Lord of the West. It is a profound and deeply human admission of frailty, a prayer that your own soul will not betray you at the final moment. Did these spells truly work? Did they silence the demons and open the gates of paradise? We can never know. But perhaps their true magic was not for the dead, but for the living. They were an expensive, beautiful, and profound comfort, a promise that even in the face of the ultimate unknown, you were not without a voice, not without a guide, not without hope. You had your book, and you prayed it would be enough to tip the scales in your favor. In the silent hall of two truths, your soul is being weighed against a feather, your eternal fate hanging in the balance. But back on earth, in the loud, frantic world of the living, no one is thinking of judgment. They are thinking of gold, they are thinking of glamour, and they are thinking of a dead boy king who has suddenly become the most famous, most fashionable man on the planet. The year is 1923. You walk the bustling streets of London or New York or Paris, and suddenly ancient Egypt is everywhere. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb hasn't just captured the headlines. It has captured the world's imagination, igniting a cultural firestorm, a fever for all things Egyptian. They call it Egyptomania. You look in the window of a high-fashion boutique on Fifth Avenue or the Rue de la Paix. The mannequins are no longer dressed in simple flapper styles. Their dresses are cut straight and narrow like an Egyptian sheath dress. The fabrics shimmer with patterns of lotus flowers and papyrus reeds. Women are wearing headbands adorned with the uraeus, the royal cobra, a symbol they do not understand but find exotic and alluring. Jewelry has been completely transformed. Suddenly, scarab beetles, once humble insects, are now crafted from precious stones and worn as brooches and pendants. Bracelets are shaped like coiled serpents. Earrings dangle with tiny golden ankhs. The deep blue of lapis lazuli and the bright green blue of turquoise are the colors of the season, echoing the treasures found in the tomb. Even hairstyles have changed. The sharp straight Tutankhamun bob becomes the height of modern fashion, a nod to the ancient Nemo's headdress of the pharaohs. You decide to go to the cinema to escape the news. But Egypt has followed you there. The grand new movie palace is not designed like a European opera house. It is an Egyptian temple. Its great imposing columns are shaped like bundles of papyrus. Winged sun discs are carved in gold above the entrance. Stone sphinxes guard the ticket booth. The entire building is a monument to a romanticized, misunderstood past. It's in the design of your own home, too. Suddenly, lotus flower motifs are appearing on furniture, on lamps, on the very wallpaper. Ashtrays are shaped like a sarcophagi. Cigarette cases are engraved with hieroglyphs that no one can read. You turn on the radio, and you hear a jaunty, almost silly tune that everyone is singing. It's the 1923 hit song, Old King Tut. Its lyrics turn the divine pharaoh into a cartoon character, a wise old nut, with a tomb of gold and junk. The sacred king has become a pop culture joke, his story reduced to a catchy melody. Plays, vaudeville acts, and pulp adventure novels all rush to capitalize on the theme of lost tombs, beautiful princesses, and, of course, vengeful mummies' curses. And as you are surrounded by this whirlwind of imitation, this sanitized, glittering version of Egypt, you can't help but feel the deep, profound disconnect. You remember the gritty bread, the mud brick houses, the constant toil, and the very real, very serious fear of the gods that defined the lives of the people who built these tombs. The world has fallen in love, not with ancient Egypt, but with a costume, a beautiful golden caricature. They wear the symbols of the gods without understanding their power. They sing cheerful songs about a king whose eternal rest they have just irrevocably disturbed. While the West was busy decorating its life with the plunder of a dead civilization, the real curse, the slow decay of the actual tombs, and the quiet disrespect for a sacred heritage was continuing in silence, hidden behind the dazzling glamour of the Golden Age. The headlines scream of dead lords and vengeful spirits. The world is convinced that everyone who touched the tomb is doomed, marked for death, by a phantom pharaoh. But while the world whispers of a curse, one man, the man who started it all, simply keeps working. You are Howard Carter, and you are tired, not of the work, never of the work, but of the noise, the superstition, the endless, foolish questions. While the legend of the curse grows into a global phenomenon, your reality becomes smaller, quieter, and infinitely more demanding. Your new home is not a grand estate purchased with treasure. It is a makeshift laboratory set up in the empty tomb of a different pharaoh, Seti II. It is hot, cramped, and filled with the ghosts of a different kind, thousands upon thousands of objects waiting to be numbered, measured, photographed, repaired, and understood. The world sees the gold, the glamour, the discovery. You see the work. You spend 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, hunched over a wooden table under the glare of a single electric bulb. Your hands, once accustomed to the rough feel of a pickaxe, now learn the delicate art of a conservator. You are cleaning a single gilded sandal, its leather fragile as a dried leaf. You are reassembling a shattered alabaster vase, piecing together fragments no bigger than your thumbnail. You are using fine brushes to whisk away the dust of 33 centuries from a single wooden bead. There are over 300 artifacts in this one small tomb. The task of cataloging them all will take you the next 10 years of your life. It is a monumental undertaking, a duty you feel with the weight of history itself. And you are in many ways alone. Lord Carnarvon, your friend and patron, is gone. Many of your original team, their work on the initial clearing done, have moved on to other digs, other lives. You remain the solitary guardian of the boy king's legacy. The pressures from the outside world are relentless. Back in England, academics who once mocked your long search now critique your methods from the comfort of their university offices. They write letters to the Times, questioning your expertise, your documentation, your very right to be in charge of such a monumental find. Meanwhile, the newly independent Egyptian government watches your every move. This is their king. This is their national treasure. And you, a foreigner, an Englishman from the age of colonial power, hold the keys. The relationship becomes strained. They see you not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of an old world one where Egypt's heritage was not its own. The fight for control over the artifacts is a constant draining battle of politics and pride. And always, there are the journalists. They hound you at every turn, waiting for you outside the tomb, shouting questions as you try to work. Mr. Carter, what of the curse? Are you not afraid? Are you next? You always give them the same answer, your voice flat with a weariness that goes bone deep. The curse is nonsense, you say, your eyes never leaving your work. The only curse I see here is the one that prevents me from doing my work in peace. The world sees you as the man who discovered gold. You see yourself as a librarian for a dead king, a humble servant tasked with putting his world back in order. You pour all your energy, all your remaining years into this one single-minded task, to honor Tutankhamun by documenting his world perfectly so that he might truly live forever, not in myth, but in fact. You survive the headlines. You survive the political battles. You survive the whispers. You outlive the curse. But as you sit alone, in the quiet of the Egyptian night, the only light coming from your small desk lamp, you sometimes wonder if the curse didn't claim you, after all, just in a different way. The discovery gave you immortality in the history books, but it cost you the rest of your life. You are forever the man who opened the tomb. And you realize with a quiet, aching sense of finality that you will never truly be able to close the door again. History remembers two names from that great discovery, Carter and Carnarvon. Their names are carved into the story, celebrated in books and documentaries. But history is often a selective storyteller. It is written by the powerful, the literate, the ones who hold the pen. And so it forgets the other names, the names of the dozens of men whose hands actually cleared the sand, whose shoulders carried the baskets of rubble, whose sweat fell upon the sacred ground, and whose skill brought a king's treasure back into the sunlight. You are one of these men. Perhaps you are a Reza foreman from the nearby village of Kurna. Your family has worked this valley for generations. Your father helped excavate the tomb of a previous king and his father before him. You do not have a degree from Oxford, but you have something more valuable, an inherited knowledge of this land. You can read the slope of a hill, the color of the rock, the way the wind carves the sand, and know where a hidden entrance might lie. You do not dig with the frantic, clumsy energy of a treasure hunter. You dig with a patient, practiced rhythm, a knowledge passed down through your bloodline. Your day begins before the first light of dawn with a simple prayer and a piece of bread. You join the silent procession of your countrymen walking the familiar path over the Theban hills into the Valley of the Kings. You carry your own tools, your own water, and the weight of your ancestors' respect for this sacred place. The work is slow, hot, and dangerous. You clear thousands of tons of ancient debris basket by heavy basket. The dust is a constant presence, filling your lungs, coating your skin. The risk of a rockfall is always there, a silent threat in the stillness. You and your team work together, often singing a low, rhythmic chant to make the labor lighter, to keep your spirits in harmony, to show the guardians of the tomb that you come with respect, not aggression. When the first step of Tutankhamun's tomb is found, it is your hands that clear it. When the heavy stone blocks are moved, it is your muscles that strain against the levers. And when a delicate gilded chariot, as fragile as a butterfly's wing, after 3,000 years must be lifted from the tomb, it is not Carter's hands that carry it. It is yours. You are the one who knows how to build the scaffolding, how to tie the ropes, how to move with a gentleness that seems impossible for men of such strength. You are the unseen architect of the excavation. And what do you think of the curse? You do not believe in the sensational stories you overhear from the European journalists in Luxor. Their curse is a thing of ghosts and movie monsters. But you believe in something older, deeper. You believe in respect for the dead. You believe that the ka of the king still lingers. Before you enter the tomb each morning, you perform your own small rituals. A quiet prayer whispered to your own local gods for protection. A small offering of water poured onto the hot sand at the entrance. You do not fear the Pharaoh's magic as much as you fear the consequence of disrespecting his eternal rest. You move with care, with reverence, because you know you are a guest in the house of a god. Then the photographers from the Times arrive with their large, intimidating cameras. They stage the photos carefully. Carter is there posing with an artifact. Lord Carnarvon is there looking noble and victorious. And you are there too. A shadow in the background, your face obscured by the brim of your hat, your hands holding a rope or a basket. You are part of the scene, but you are not part of the story they will tell. Your name will not appear in the captions. Your contribution will be a footnote, if it is mentioned at all. And so there were two discoveries made in that valley. The world discovered a golden king, a treasure that would redefine history. But you and your men, you simply did your job with a skill and dignity that history chose to forget. The curse may be a story told in the West, but the discovery, the physical act of bringing a pharaoh back into the light, belongs to the silent, unseen Egyptian hands. And though the world may have forgotten your names, the dust of the valley remembers your footsteps. The stories, the legends, the curses. They all swirl like sand in the wind around one silent, still figure at the heart of it. All the king himself. For decades after his discovery, the body of Tutankhamun was an object of awe, of mystery, and of morbid superstition. But today, with the precise and respectful tools of modern science, we can finally ask him to speak. And his bones, silent for 3 millennia, tell a story far more human and far more tragic than any curse. You are in a sterile white laboratory in Cairo. There is no dust, no flickering torchlight. Before you, on a high-resolution computer screen, is not a golden mask, but a ghostly 3-dimensional image rendered in shades of gray. It is a CT scan of Tutankhamun. Your tools are not pickaxes and shovels, but data pixels and DNA sequencers. You are a forensic scientist, and you are about to perform a digital autopsy. You remember the old photographs from the 19th century, the era of the mummy unwrapping parties. Mummies treated like curiosities, their linen bandages torn away, their bodies damaged, their sacred context lost forever. Now, your approach is different. It is one of reverence. You can unwrap him digitally, layer by layer, peeling back skin, muscle, and bone without disturbing a single ancient thread. And what you find is not the body of a golden god. It is the body of a very sick young man. The first clue lies in his DNA, carefully extracted from a fragment of bone. The results confirm what historians had long suspected. His parents were brother and sister. Generations of inbreeding of royal families marrying within themselves to keep the bloodline pure had left their devastating mark on this boy king. You see it in his very skeleton. He had a partially cleft palate. He had scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, and his left foot was severely deformed, a condition known as clubfoot, combined with Kohler's disease, a rare bone disorder that would have caused him chronic pain and made it impossible to walk without support. Suddenly, the 130 ornate walking canes found in his tomb are no longer just symbols of royal authority. They were necessities. This was not a warrior king who rode into battle on a golden chariot. This was a disabled young man who limped through his own palace, and his body was fighting other battles. Your analysis reveals traces of the DNA of the malaria parasite Plasmodium falciparum, the deadliest strain known to man. He had likely suffered from multiple recurring bouts of the disease, leaving him weakened, feverish, and with a compromised immune system. For years, the world believed he was murdered. Early X-rays from 1968 showed a dark shadow on the back of his skull, leading to decades of speculation about a fatal blow to the head. But your high-resolution CT scan tells a different story. The skull damage you can see clearly happened after death, likely a result of the embalming process when the brain was removed. There was no murder. You zoom in on his left leg, his weaker side, and there it is, a severe compound fracture just above the knee. The bone is shattered. You can reconstruct the likely scenario. Perhaps he fell maybe from his chariot during a royal hunt, an activity he would have been expected to participate in despite his physical limitations. The injury itself was not necessarily fatal. But for a young man whose immune system was already ravaged by malaria and weakened by genetic disorders, a severe open wound was the final straw. The fracture almost certainly became badly infected, and within days sepsis would have overwhelmed his fragile body. So, he was not murdered by a jealous rival. He was not struck down by a phantom curse. He was defeated by his own frail body, a prisoner of his own royal blood. The true curse that haunted Tutankhamun was not a magical spell. It was the genetic legacy of his divine ancestry. The very thing that made him a king, the obsession with purity, the sacred bloodline of the gods, was also what made him weak-sick and ultimately heartbreakingly mortal. His end was not a mystery. It was a tragedy written not on his tomb walls, but in his very own DNA. The king's body has been studied, his secrets coaxed from his bones. But the story now shifts from the man to the world he was meant to take with him. A second, even longer unwrapping begins the unwrapping of his possessions, the careful and painstaking journey of over 5,000 objects from the sacred darkness of the tomb to the bright, sterile light of the modern world. You are a conservator now, part of Howard Carter's small, dedicated team. Your workshop is not a grand laboratory, but another larger tomb nearby, converted into a space for preservation. Your patients are not people, but 3,000-year-old objects on the verge of turning to dust. The responsibility is immense. Your first task is a pair of the king's leather sandals. They are intricately decorated, but the leather, after 33 centuries, is as brittle as a dried leaf. You cannot simply pick them up. They would disintegrate. You spend days carefully applying a solution of wax and resin with a fine brush, slowly coaxing strength back into the fragile material, praying that it does not crumble in your hands. Next, a wooden chest, its painted surface, and gold leaf flaking away. The dry desert air had preserved it, but the sudden exposure to the humidity of the outside world is a shock to its system. You work for weeks consolidating the surface. 1 square centimeter at a time, your breath held your hand, perfectly steady. There are ceremonial robes that threaten to unravel if you look at them too hard. There are intricate floral collars, their ancient petals still holding a hint of color that must be preserved under glass immediately or they will vanish forever. The work is slow, tedious, and filled with a kind of holy terror. You are handling the personal belongings of a god king. Every object feels sacred, alive with the memory of his touch. And then comes the day of the mask. After the many layers of linen have been carefully removed from the mummy, Carter and his team finally reveal it. The golden death mask of Tutankhamun. The moment it is lifted from the king's face is not one of triumph, but of profound, hushed awe. It is not just an object. It feels as if you are lifting the very face of a god from his slumber. 24 pounds of solid gold inlaid with lapis lazuli and quartz. Its serene, youthful gaze seems to look right through you across the centuries. Its journey out of the valley is a nerve-wracking affair. It is packed in a custom-made crate padded with endless layers of cotton wool. It is transported under armed guard, not just to protect it from thieves, but to protect it from the world itself. You watch as it travels down the Nile on a steamship. Along the riverbanks, local Egyptians gather. They do not cheer. They watch in a kind of reverent silence, their faces filled with an emotion you cannot quite name. This is not just gold being moved. This is the return of one of their ancient kings, a ghost from their own deep past. Its final destination is not the Field of Reeds. It is the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. You stand before it now in the quiet, dim light of the museum hall. The crowds press in around you, their faces reflected in the thick, climate-controlled glass of its case. It is beautiful, yes, perfect. It is the most exquisite thing you have ever seen. But as you look at it, you feel a sense of profound loss. In the tomb, it was a magical object, a divine face for the king's soul to inhabit in the afterlife. It had a purpose. It was part of a sacred machine designed for resurrection. Here it is an exhibit. Exhibit number JE60672. Its sacred purpose is gone, replaced by a catalog number and a velvet rope. It is admired, but it is no longer alive with meaning. This, perhaps, is another form of the curse of displacement. The treasures were saved from the darkness of the tomb, only to be placed in a new kind of tomb, a glass case. They are preserved, but they are unmoored from their spiritual home. The boy king's treasures have found a new, eternal resting place, not in the tranquil paradise of the afterlife, but under the constant admiring and uncomprehending gaze of the modern world. For every story you've heard about Tutankhamun, for every headline that screamed of his curse, there are 1,000 other stories that have been lost to the sand. Thousands of other tombs, other lives, and other far more terrifying warnings. When you look at them, the story of the famous curse begins to change. It becomes less about one king's unique magic and more about our own selective fascination. You are a historian now, sifting through the quiet archives of archaeological journals. Your job is not to focus on one sensational discovery, but to see the pattern across the centuries. You are looking for other curses. And you find them. Everywhere. You pull out the translation of the inscriptions from a mastaba at Saqqara, the tomb of a vizier named Kentika Ikeki. He was a powerful official from the 6th dynasty who lived more than 1,000 years before Tutankhamun was even born. His tomb was meant to be his eternal house, and he did not want uninvited guests. His warning, carved clearly in stone for all to see, is not subtle. It is a direct personal threat from beyond the grave. It reads, "As for all men who shall enter this my tomb in their impurity, there will be a judgment. An end shall be made for him. I shall seize his neck like a bird. I shall cast the fear of myself into him, that the living on earth may see and may fear the spirits of the revered dead. I shall seize his neck like a bird." The imagery is violent. The intent is clear. This is a far more explicit and personal threat than anything found in Tutankhamun's relatively quiet tomb. And yet, what happened when this tomb was excavated by archaeologists in the early 20th century? Nothing. No headlines of mysterious deaths. No whispers of a vizier's vengeful ghost haunting the dig team. The archaeologists went home, wrote their scholarly reports, and lived to old age. The curse of Kentika Ikeki remained silent, a threat without a story, a ghost without an audience. You find another record from the tomb of a governor of Upper Egypt named Harkuf. His inscription is less about violence and more about divine law. It promises that he, as a spirit, will protect any future official who respects his tomb. But it also warns that anyone who damages it will be judged for it in the great court of the afterlife by the great God, a threat of eternal consequence, not immediate doom. When his tomb was studied, the world did not notice. The curse remained a private conversation between a man and his God. But the belief in tomb guardians is not just a Western invention born of newspaper headlines. It is deeply rooted in Egyptian folklore itself. You listen to the stories told by the local villagers in Kurna, the men whose families have worked the digs for generations. They speak not of a mummy's curse, a phrase that sounds foreign to their ears. They speak of the Afrit, powerful fiery spirits or jinn bound to protect sacred places. To them, the danger in the tombs is real, but it is not a pharaoh's ancient spell. It is the wrath of these elemental guardians who do not distinguish between a thief and an archaeologist. They only know trespass. So why did Tutankhamun's tomb, one with no explicit curse text, become the center of a global legend while these others were forgotten? The answer lies not in the tomb, but in the timing. The other curses were missing the perfect ingredients. They did not have a nearly intact golden treasure trove to capture the world's imagination. They did not have the new hungry machine of 20th century mass media, desperate for a sensational story. And most importantly, they did not have the tragic, perfectly timed death of a famous and beloved British lord to serve as their dramatic climax. A curse needs more than just ancient words written on a wall. It needs a modern audience. It needs a story. And Tutankhamun, the boy king, gave the world the best story it had heard in a century. His legend was not born of his own power, but of a perfect storm of discovery, media, and coincidence. The other pharaohs, with their far more frightening warnings, continue to sleep in peace, their threats forgotten by a world that only had room for one ghost story. The death of Lord Carnarvon did more than just sell newspapers. It drew a line in the sand, splitting the world into two camps, two armies fighting a new kind of war. This was not a war of nations, but a war of belief, a battle for the very soul of the 20th century. You are a quiet observer of this war. You read the impassioned letters to the editor in the Times. You attend crowded public lectures in London. You sit in smoke-filled cafes where the air is thick with whispered theories and strong opinions. On one side, you have the spiritualists. On the other, the skeptics. The spiritualists are a powerful cultural movement, their numbers swelled by the immense grief and loss of the Great War. They believe the world is thin, that the veil between the living and the dead can be pierced. They hold seances in darkened parlors, hoping to speak with the sons and husbands they lost in the trenches. To them, the idea of a spirit's power reaching across time is not only possible, it is a profound comfort. Their most famous champion is a man you know well, a man the world associates with pure cold logic, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. The irony is not lost on you. The man who invented the world's greatest detective now champions a belief in ghosts, fairies, and ancient magic. He writes letters to the newspapers, his voice carrying immense public weight. He doesn't believe in a simple curse. His theory is more elaborate. He suggests that ancient Egyptian priests, masters of occult sciences, did not leave behind a mere spell. They created powerful elementals, artificial beings made of pure energy bound to the tomb and designed to attack the aura of any who dared to trespass. These are not the spirits of the dead, he argues, but something far older and more dangerous. You attend a lecture he gives. The room is packed. He speaks with a calm, unwavering conviction that is both unsettling and deeply compelling. He argues that Lord Carnarvon's death was not caused by a mosquito, but by one of these elemental guardians, a force that modern science is too arrogant to understand. On the other side of the line stand the men of science, the doctors, the archaeologists, the quiet rationalists. Their voices are calmer, less dramatic. They do not speak of elementals, they speak of bacteria. They do not talk of magic, they talk of coincidence and probability. They write their own letters to the editor, pointing out that Howard Carter, the man most exposed to the tomb, is perfectly healthy. They publish articles on the dangers of aspergillus mold found in ancient sealed environments. They remind the public that Lord Carnarvon's health was already fragile. Their arguments are logical, sound, and, for many people, a little boring. And in the middle, fanning the flames on both sides, is the press. They are not interested in settling the debate. They are interested in selling it. On one page, they will print a letter from a scientist discussing microbiology. On the next, they will print an interview with a psychic who claims to have channeled the spirit of Tutankhamun himself, who is apparently very annoyed. And so, the war rages on. It is not really a battle over a dead king in Egypt. It is a battle for how the world is to be understood. Is it a magical, mysterious place full of unseen forces, a place where ancient curses hold real power? Or is it a rational, understandable machine governed by laws of science that we are just beginning to comprehend? The curse of Tutankhamun forced everyone to choose a side. And for a world still trying to heal from the very real, very rational horrors of a world war, the allure of magic, of mystery, of a power beyond human comprehension was stronger than ever. The world had its supernatural drama. Its headlines screamed of vengeful spirits and ancient magic. Its audiences thrilled to the spooky tale of a lord struck down by a long-dead king. But behind the velvet curtain of the myth, a family was quietly grieving. For them, the curse was not a thing of magic or mystery. It was the simple, brutal, and very human weight of loss. A weight made infinitely heavier by the unblinking eyes of the entire world. At the center of this quiet storm is Lady Evelyn Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's daughter. She is just 21 years old. She was not just a visitor to the tomb. She was a participant. She stood beside her father and Howard Carter, one of the first 3 people in over 3,000 years to peer into the antechamber and see the wonderful things. Her excitement was as real as theirs. And then, Just a few months later, she stood by her father's bedside in that lonely Cairo hotel room and watched him die. She returns to England, not just as a grieving daughter, but as a key figure in a global legend. She becomes a living relic of the curse. Reporters follow her. Strangers stare at her in the street, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and a morbid, intrusive curiosity. They want to know. They need to know. Did you feel it, the Pharaoh's presence? Do you believe in the curse? Are you afraid that you are next? How do you answer a question like that? How do you explain that your grief is not a ghost story, that the loss of your father is not a piece of public entertainment? So she chooses silence. Lady Evelyn does not give interviews. She does not write a tell-all book to capitalize on the fame. She does not attend seances or speak to spiritualists. Instead, she withdraws. She marries, has a family, and chooses a life of profound and deliberate privacy away from the glare of the headlines. She refuses to be a character in the world's ghost story. For the rest of her long life, she will rarely speak of the tomb of the curse or of those final tragic days in Cairo. And then there is Almina, the Countess of Carnarvon, Lord Carnarvon's wife. While her husband was the face of the discovery, she was its quiet, powerful engine. It was her immense personal fortune inherited from her father, Alfred de Rothschild, that funded the entire expedition. It was her money that paid for the workers, the tools, the travel, and the long, fruitless years of searching when everyone else had given up hope. She had invested a fortune in her husband's dream. After his death, she is left not with glory, but with complications. She must manage the sprawling Highclere Castle estate, settle her husband's considerable debts, and navigate the endless legal complexities of the discovery. She fights to ensure that her husband's personal collection of artifacts is recognized, all while the world is more interested in his supernatural death than his life's great achievement. For the Carnarvon family, the tomb was not a source of fabulous treasure. It was a source of profound tragedy. They had to watch as a beloved husband and father was transformed overnight into the first victim of a tabloid myth. They had to live with the constant whispers, the unending questions, the shadow of a curse they knew wasn't real, but which the world refused to let go of. This was the true personal toll of the Pharaoh's curse. It wasn't a supernatural affliction that struck from the grave. It was the very human pain of having your private grief turned into public spectacle. For the Carnarvons, the curse wasn't a spirit from an ancient tomb. It was the heavy, suffocating weight of a story that was no longer their own, a ghost story they would have to carry for the rest of their lives. Long before the first word of a curse was whispered by a journalist, the curse was already being built. It was not built with magic or spells, but with stone shadow and a deep understanding of human psychology. The architects of the Pharaoh's tombs were not just builders. They were masters of fear, and the tombs they designed were not just houses for the dead, but sacred traps for the living. You are one of these architects, now a man of high status entrusted with the most sacred task in the kingdom, to design a house for a god that can withstand not only eternity, but also the endless greed of men. Your blueprint is not just for a building. It is for a fortress, a maze, and a psychological landscape of dread. Your first line of defense is not a wall, but a secret. You choose a location in the desolate Valley of the Kings, a place that is already a natural fortress of cliffs and heat. You oversee the cutting of the tomb deep into the limestone, a process that can take years. And when it is finished, after the pharaoh has been laid to rest and the treasures have been sealed inside your most important work, you make it disappear. You bury the entrance under tons of limestone chips and rubble, carefully scattering the debris to make it blend perfectly with the surrounding valley floor. You erase its very existence from the landscape, leaving only the wind and the sand as its silent guardians. But you know that secrets are hard to keep. You know that thieves are patient. So you design the interior of the tomb not just for beauty, but for deterrence. The journey begins with a long, steep staircase descending deep into the earth. This is intentional. It is a journey downward into darkness, away from the world of the living. With every step, an intruder feels more isolated, more vulnerable, the weight of the mountain pressing down on them. Then come the tricks. You design false burial chambers, beautifully decorated rooms, that lead nowhere. They are meant to fool a thief into thinking they have reached the end, that the treasure has already been taken, encouraging them to give up and leave. You fill entire corridors with tightly packed rubble, creating a barrier that would take days of noisy, dangerous work to clear. In some of the grander tombs, you design a deep, vertical shaft in the middle of a passageway, a well shaft. It drops into a dark, empty pit. An ancient robber seeing it might assume the tomb ends there, but the true path is a hidden doorway high up in the wall above the shaft, almost impossible to see in the flickering torchlight. It is a brilliant piece of misdirection. And even if an intruder makes it past these obstacles, they must still face the psychological power of the art itself. The walls are covered with images of judging gods, of serpents, and demons from the underworld of the Pharaoh in his divine, all-powerful form. The air is stale and unnaturally still. Every sound, a dropped tool, a dislodged pebble, echoes endlessly in the suffocating silence. It feels like the tomb itself is alive and that it is watching. Finally, at the heart of the tomb lies the last layer of defense, a series of nested shrines and coffins. To reach the king's body is not a single act, but a dozen. Each seal must be broken. Each shrine opened, each golden coffin lifted. It is a slow, methodical process of desecration, each step filled with the risk of being caught and the ever-growing feeling of dread. So the fear that Howard Carter felt, the terror that ancient tomb robbers must have experienced, was not necessarily supernatural. It was by design. The architects of the valley were masters of psychological warfare. They built the curse into the very stones of the tomb. The feeling of being unwelcome, of trespassing on sacred ground, was not an accident. It was the first and perhaps the most powerful line of defense. The ancient curse, born of phantoms and fear, has faded into the quiet pages of history. The headlines have yellowed. The spiritualists have fallen silent. But if you stand in the Valley of the Kings today, you will feel the presence of a new curse. One that is slower, quieter, and far more destructive than any ancient spell. This is the curse of us, the curse of being loved. You are a conservator now, a guardian of these sacred spaces. You stand at the entrance to a pharaoh's tomb, not with a flickering torch, but with a clipboard and a digital sensor that measures humidity and temperature. Your job is to fight a battle against an enemy that means no harm, an enemy that has come from across the world to show respect and awe the tourist. You watch them arrive every morning by the busload, thousands of them, their faces filled with a genuine wonder that is both beautiful and terrifying to you. They descend the same narrow staircases that Carter once cleared. They file into the small, fragile chambers, their voices echoing in excited whispers. And with them, they bring the modern world an environment the tomb was never meant to endure. The first and most relentless enemy is the human breath. Imagine a single person exhaling in the tight enclosed space of a burial chamber. With that one breath, they release moisture, carbon dioxide, and thousands of microscopic organic particles into the tomb's perfectly stable, arid atmosphere. Now multiply that by thousands of visitors every single day for decades. You can see the effect on your sensors. The humidity inside the tomb spikes. This moisture, a soft, invisible poison, is absorbed by the porous limestone walls, which are naturally filled with ancient salts. As the tomb's air cycles throughout the day and the moisture evaporates, that salt begins to crystallize. And as it crystallizes, it expands with a slow, unstoppable force. You look closely at the wall, at a magnificent painting of the goddess Isis, spreading her protective wings. You can see it happening. Tiny, almost invisible flakes of the 3,000-year-old paint, no bigger than a grain of sand, are lifting away from the stone, being pushed off from behind by the growing salt crystals. The tomb is literally flaking away one breath at a time. And it's not just the breath. Then there is the dust we bring. It is not the sterile dust of ancient stone. It is a cloud of lint from our clothes, microscopic fibers of cotton, and polyester dead skin cells, and bacteria from our world. This modern dust settles on the ancient murals, providing a rich feast for new kinds of mold and fungi. You see it as dark, creeping spots on the ceilings, a modern plague that the ancient priests never prepared for. Our very presence generates heat, A single human body is a small furnace. A crowd of 30 people in a small chamber can raise the temperature by several degrees, upsetting the delicate, unchanging climate that has preserved these paintings for millennia. Even the constant vibration from our thousands of footsteps creates microfissures in the ancient, fragile plaster. And so you fight back, not with spells, but with science. You install powerful silent ventilation systems that constantly circulate the air, pulling out the dangerous humidity. You erect thick, clear glass panels, creating a physical barrier between our world and theirs. You limit the number of visitors allowed inside each day. You shorten the time they can stay. You become a guardian, a gatekeeper, politely denying access to protect the very thing people have come to see. And you support the ultimate heartbreaking solution, the replica. A perfect 1-to-1 scale copy of Tutankhamun's tomb has been built nearby, allowing millions to experience the wonder without destroying the original. But you know it is not the same. It does not hold the same silence, the same weight of time. This is the real curse of the pharaohs in the 21st century. It is not one of malice or revenge. It is a curse of admiration. In our quest to see eternity, we are speeding up its decay. We are, with the very best of intentions, loving these sacred places to death. We have explored the science of spores and the psychology of suggestion. We have followed the artifacts on their long journey from sacred darkness to museum glass. We have seen how a legend was born from headlines and immortalized on film. But let's return one last time to the beginning, to the stone walls, the silent hieroglyphs, and the very source of the myth. After all the whispers, the deaths, and the legends, what did the ancient warnings, the so-called curses, truly say? You are an epigrapher, now a scholar of ancient texts. Your job is not to dig, but to read. You stand before a tomb wall, not with a flickering torch, but with a notebook and a deep knowledge of the sacred language of the gods. You are here to translate, not to sensationalize. First, you examine the detailed records from Tutankhamun's tomb itself, the place where the global legend was born. And what you find is a profound and telling silence. There is no grand curse. There is no threat of swift-winged death. The texts found within are standard, almost formulaic religious passages. They are hymns to the gods. They are spells from the Book of the Dead, designed to aid the king on his journey to help him navigate the perils of the underworld. They are words of hope, of protection, of resurrection. They are not words of revenge. To find the real warnings, you must leave the tomb of the boy king and enter the tombs of his ancestors and officials. You turn to the inscription from the mastaba of Kentaka Ikeki, the vizier who lived a millennium before Tut. You read his words again, but this time you listen like an ancient Egyptian. As for any man who shall enter this my tomb in his impurity, I shall wring his neck like a bird's. Let's listen to those words carefully. In his impurity. This is not a threat against any and all who enter. It is a warning to those who would defile a sacred space, who would enter without undergoing the proper rituals of purification. It is a religious, not a general threat. I shall wring his neck like a bird's. A violent image, certainly. But in the poetic and metaphorical language of ancient Egypt, this is likely a description of swift and total defeat in the afterlife. It is a promise of spiritual annihilation before the court of the gods, not a promise of a physical phantom attack in the world of the living. The consequences threatened in these texts are almost always about the afterlife. The trespasser will be judged harshly by Osiris. His offerings will be rejected by the gods. His name will be blotted out. His soul will not find the field of reeds. These are threats against one's eternity, not one's immediate mortal life. Now compare this to the story the world fell in love with. The newspaper curse was simple, direct, and cinematic. Death shall come on swift wings. It sounds like a movie poster. The real warnings were more like complex legal and spiritual contracts with the gods, filled with conditional clauses, and concerned with ritual purity and eternal judgment. You are standing in the tomb again, in the quiet, still air. But this time, you read the walls differently. The painted figures of the gods are no longer menacing guardians of a curse. They are protective deities, shielding the king on his journey. The hieroglyphs are not threats aimed at you. They are pleas. Pleas for the king's soul to be accepted into the next world. Pleas for his eternal house to be left in peace. You realize in the profound silence that these tombs were never meant to be aggressive. They were defensive. They were sanctuaries. The silence of the gods was not a sign of their slumbering anger. It was simply silence, the eternal rest they so desperately craved. Perhaps the greatest curse of all was our profound misunderstanding. We arrived looking for a horror story, and so we found one, projecting our own modern fears of death ghosts and revenge onto a civilization that simply wanted to dream forever, undisturbed. We were the ghosts in their story, not the other way around. And so we arrive at the heart of the myth, the source of the fear, the supposed curse itself. You have probably heard it, or read it, or seen it carved dramatically into the stone of a movie set, a terrifying warning promising death to all who enter. The most famous version whispers, "Death shall come on swift wings to him that toucheth the tomb of the Pharaoh." It is a powerful line, chilling, poetic. It is the perfect incantation for a ghost story, and it is a complete invention. It was likely created by a clever journalist in the 1920s, a piece of fiction designed to add a layer of supernatural dread to an already sensational story. No such inscription was ever found in, or on, or anywhere near Tutankhamun's tomb. Howard Carter's own meticulous records, which cataloged every single object and inscription, make no mention of it. The truth, as it often is much quieter. While some Egyptian tombs, particularly those of non-royal officials from earlier periods, did contain protective warnings, they were not the death spells of popular imagination. They were more like spiritual and legal deterrents. They didn't threaten intruders with instant magical death. They threatened them with judgment in the afterlife. They were promises of divine retribution. Warnings that the gods would reckon with anyone who disturbed the sacred rest of the deceased. An inscription from one old kingdom tomb reads, "As for any man who shall enter this my tomb in his impurity, I shall wring his neck like a bird's." A violent image, yes, but it refers to a spiritual punishment in the next world, not a physical one in this one. The foundation of the legend, the ancient magical text that supposedly killed a dozen men simply, wasn't there. The curse was born not from a hieroglyph, but from a headline. But what about all the deaths? Surely so many tragedies can't be a coincidence. The list of victims printed in newspapers around the world seem to be undeniable proof. But numbers, unlike stories, do not have an agenda. When you look at the statistics, the legend begins to dissolve. Several studies, including one published in the prestigious medical journal, the British Medical Journal, have examined the survival rates of the people who were there. They compared the lifespans of the Westerners who were present when the tomb was opened to a similar group of people who were in Egypt at the time but had no contact with the tomb. The results tell a different story. There was no statistically significant difference in their average age of death. The curse had no measurable effect on their mortality. And then there are the inconvenient survivors, the people the legend prefers to forget. Let's look again at the man, at the very center of it all. Howard Carter. If the curse were real, he should have been its first and most certain victim. He was the one who breached the door the first to breathe the ancient air. He spent a decade of his life working inside the tomb, yet he died of natural causes in 1939, 16 years after the discovery. And what of Lady Evelyn Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's daughter, who stood beside Carter and her father peering into the darkness? She lived to be 79 years old. Dr. Douglas Derry, who performed the first autopsy on Tutankhamun's mummy, lived to be 87. Many of the Egyptian workers, who did the most physically demanding work, lived long and healthy lives. The curse was an illusion, a trick of the light created by focusing only on the fallen trees while ignoring the thriving forest all around them. It was a story built from a handful of sad coincidences, while the quiet, boring truth of survival was left unreported. So if it wasn't magic, what was the real threat? If a phantom pharaoh wasn't the killer, were there other more tangible dangers lurking in that silent, sealed chamber? The answer is yes. The tomb was dangerous, just not in the way the newspapers imagined. As we've whispered about before, the most likely culprit was biological. A sealed tomb filled with organic materials like foodwood and linen is a perfect incubator for ancient fungi and bacteria. When the seal was broken, a cloud of dormant spores like aspergillus could have been released. For a healthy person, this might cause a mild irritation. But for someone with a weakened immune system like Lord Carnarvon, inhaling these spores could lead to a fatal lung infection. Beyond the living threats, there were chemical ones. The ancient embalmers were masters of preservation, and their tools were often toxic. The pigments used to paint the beautiful murals could contain heavy metals like lead or arsenic. The resins used to seal the coffins could release volatile compounds. Over thousands of years, these toxins could have settled as a fine invisible dust on every surface. And then there is the very environment of the tomb itself. Cut deep into the limestone of the valley, it's possible that natural radioactive gases, like radon, could have accumulated over the millennia, or that droppings from bats that may have once inhabited the outer passages could carry their own dangerous pathogens. The real curse was a cocktail of natural hazards. It was the quiet scientific danger of opening a time capsule. The threat was real, but it came from microbiology and geology, not from the supernatural. The pharaoh didn't need to cast a spell. The science of his burial and the very earth that held him had created a defense all on their own. So we know the facts. The science is logical. The statistics are clear. But the facts don't feel as powerful as the story, do they? The story of the curse persists not because it is true, but because it is a better story. Think about it. The death of Lord Carnarvon from an infected mosquito bite is a sad, random, and ultimately meaningless tragedy. It is the kind of mundane misfortune that happens every day. But a curse gives his death meaning. It transforms him from a victim of bad luck into a participant in a grand cosmic drama. He did not simply die. He was punished by an ancient king for his hubris. That is a story with heroes, villains, and a sense of justice, however terrifying. We humans are narrative creatures. We crave patterns. We need stories to make sense of a chaotic world. The legend of the Pharaoh's curse is far more compelling than a quiet lecture on microbiology. It speaks to our primal fears of the unknown, of death, and of disturbing the sacred. It whispers to us that there are forces in the world older and more powerful than we are. In a way, we prefer a world with a little magic, even if it's dangerous. It's more interesting than a world governed only by predictable laws. The curse allowed people in the 1920s, a generation scarred by the cold mechanical slaughter of a world war, to believe in something beyond human reason. It offered a different kind of order, and so the story lives on. We tell it to our children. We watch it in movies. We whisper it in museums. Not because we believe it is literally true, but because it feels true on a deeper, more mythic level. The truth is that Lord Carnarvon died. The story is that a pharaoh killed him. And we will always remember the story. The ancient priests who sealed the tombs understood something we often forget. Fear can be a powerful guardian. The warnings they carved, threatening divine judgment, were a form of spiritual control designed to protect the sacred by invoking a deep, primal fear of the consequences. In a strange way, the modern myth of the curse serves a similar purpose. It creates a psychological boundary around these ancient sites. It reminds us, even in our secular scientific age, that some places are different, that to enter them is to trespass. The story of the curse is a modern form of a keep-out sign, one written not in hieroglyphs, but in our own collective superstition. It reflects a conflict within ourselves. We approach the past with a kind of modern arrogance, with our cameras, our sensors, our ability to analyze DNA and date artifacts down to the decade. We believe we have conquered history, that we can own it, catalog it, and display it behind glass. But the story of the curse pushes back. It suggests that the past is not so easily tamed, that it has its own power, its own rules, and that it can still, in a way, harm us. Whether through a dormant spore or through our own fear, the past is not passive. Perhaps the story of the curse is a way for us to unconsciously express a guilt we feel, a guilt for disturbing the eternal sleep of kings, for turning their sacred burial goods into museum exhibits, for reducing their journey to the afterlife into a tourist attraction. The curse is a narrative that puts the power back in the hands of the pharaohs. It restores their dignity by giving them a voice, even if it is a voice of vengeance. It is our way of admitting that on some level what we have done feels wrong. And so we invent a punishment to fit the crime. You might think the world of the pharaohs, with its gods and tombs and curses, is impossibly distant. But if you listen closely, you can hear its echoes in the pressures of your own modern world. Think of the way the pharaohs were depicted in their art. Always young, strong, serene, perfect. Their portraits on temple walls were not meant to be realistic. They were meant to project an image of divine, flawless power. It was the original profile picture carefully curated to present an idealized version of the self to the world. Is it so different from the way we filter and frame our own lives on social media, showing only the moments of triumph, beauty, and success while hiding the messy, human reality behind the screen? Think of the immense pressure on an ancient queen to produce a male heir. Her entire value, her safety, and her legacy often depended on her ability to continue the royal bloodline. While the context has changed, the echoes of that reproductive pressure still linger in the complex expectations society places on women today regarding career, family, and the timing of motherhood. And consider the pharaoh's obsession with eternity. The pyramids, the tombs, the treasures, all of it was a monumental effort to ensure that his name would never be forgotten, that he would achieve a form of immortality. Is our modern desire to leave a digital legacy, our photos, our posts, our online presence, so different we too are building our own small monuments, hoping that some part of us will endure long after we are gone? The tools have changed. The gods have different names. But the fundamental human anxieties about how we are seen, what our purpose is, and whether we will be remembered are the same. The story of the pharaohs is not just about a lost world. It is about a world that in its deepest, most human desires is not so lost at all. And so the story of the curse settles like fine dust in a forgotten chamber. We have walked through the heat of the valley, stood in the silent presence of the artisans, and felt the desperation of the ancient thieves. We have held our breath with Carter at the door of eternity, and we have watched as the world spun a tale of magic and revenge from a simple human tragedy. In the end, the story was never truly about a pharaoh's wrath. It was about us. It was about our own fear of death, our own hunger for mystery, and our unending need to tell stories that give order to a chaotic world. The curse was a reflection not of an ancient power, but of a modern fascination. We looked into the golden face of a dead king and saw not a boy, but a monster of our own making. We listened to the silence of his tomb and heard the echo of our own fears. The magic was never in the tomb. It was in the telling of the tale. And like all great tales, it has now found its ending, leaving behind only the quiet truth and the stillness of the desert night. But the cruelest truth, the one that lingers long after the ghost story has faded, is this: the real tragedy was never supernatural. Lord Carnarvon did not die from a pharaoh's ancient magic. He died from an infected mosquito bite, a mundane and very human fate that any ancient Egyptian living in constant fear of fever and infection would have understood completely. His death was not an act of vengeance. It was simply a reminder of how fragile life has always been. And the greater irony lies with the king himself. Tutankhamun, who was buried with an immense fortune meant to fund his journey through eternity, never reached his destination in the way he intended. His eternal rest was disturbed, his sacred peace broken not by demons of the underworld, but by our own insatiable curiosity. His treasures, meant to be his companions in the field of reeds, now sit under the sterile lights of a museum. Their sacred purpose is gone, replaced by a catalog number and a velvet rope. The boy king has achieved a form of immortality, yes, but it is one he never asked for. He is remembered not as a god in paradise, but as the world's most famous and perhaps most misunderstood ghost. But let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. If you had been there in that dusty valley on that hot November day, if you had been the one to clear away the final stone, imagine it. You stand before a sealed door, untouched for over 3,000 years. You hear the whispers of your workers, the story of the cobra and the canary, an omen fresh in their minds. You feel the weight of 33 centuries of silence pressing in on you. As you make the first small opening and the ancient, musty air rushes out to meet you, a part of you feels the thrill of discovery. But would another part, a quieter, more ancient part of your soul, have felt the chill of a warning? Would you have dismissed the stories as mere superstition? Or would you have felt deep in your bones that you were a trespasser, a violator of a sacred pact? Would you have been brave enough to enter? Or would you for just a moment have believed in the curse? There is no right answer. There is only the quiet question hanging forever in that still golden air. We may not have Pharaoh's tombs to unseal, but our modern world is full of its own quiet curses, isn't it? We all have our small superstitions. A lucky number, a street we avoid walking down at night, the ritual of knocking on wood. We tell ourselves they are just habits, silly and meaningless. But they come from the same place as the belief in the Pharaoh's curse. They come from our deep need to find patterns in the randomness of life, to feel a sense of control in a world that often offers none. The story of the curse persists not because it tells us about ancient Egypt, but because it tells us about ourselves. It shows us how easily we can be swayed by a compelling narrative, how quickly we can see patterns where none exist, and how deeply we long to believe that there is something more to the world than what we can see and touch. The pharaohs are long gone, their gods have fallen silent, but our need to believe in something beyond the veil, that is eternal. But you are not in that valley anymore. You are not standing in the dust and the heat of the Egyptian sun. The story is over now. The whispers have faded and the weight of 3,000 years of history is lifting from your shoulders. You are here in your own quiet space, in the peaceful stillness of your own room. Feel the softness of your pillow beneath your head. Feel the gentle weight of the blanket resting upon you. There are no cold stone walls here, no dark, narrow corridors. Only comfort. You are warm now. A deep, gentle warmth that has nothing to do with the desert sun, a warmth that comes from your own safe space. The only sound is the quiet hum of a fan, or perhaps the peaceful silence of the night outside your window. There are no dangers lurking in these shadows, no ancient warnings to decipher. You are here. You are safe. You are quiet. Let the dust of the valley settle in your mind. Let the glimmer of the golden mask fade into a soft, comfortable darkness. The story is gone. It has returned to the past where it belongs. And you are here, in the now. There are no gods weighing your heart here, no judgment to face. There is only this moment, this quiet, this peace. All that's left now is the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. A soft, steady song that your body sings to itself. Feel it. A slow breath in, and a long, slow breath out. Letting the day go. Letting the story go, feeling the rise and the fall of your own chest. Just the quiet, just your breath. Breathing in and breathing out, resting, drifting. Sleep now, sleep.